In a distant world where spirits reign all around, there lived a young man who could talk to them. With his abilities, he managed to become part of a squad of 5 heroes, and together they were able to defeat the Demon King. The young man with such an unusual ability is called Universe by everyone around. If you looked from above, you could see an amazing and captivating panorama of the Kingdom of Fools. Right in the middle stood a majestic castle, a true architectural masterpiece and the main symbol of this country's power. The dark-haired boy was very surprised, waving his hands vigorously and trying to find out what had happened. He was curious why everything happened exactly like that and what made his colleagues behave so unusually. The hero who single-handedly defeated the Demon King cast a stern look at the enemy. Behind him stood loyal comrades who also contributed to this difficult struggle. In front of everyone stood a stern and strong man in heavy armor. He firmly said that he was not their ally, but only responsible for the operation of magical devices. A young blonde girl who had just been touching up her lips picked up the stern remark. She added that the boy had always been reclusive. During campaigns, he did not talk to anyone and kept to himself. Another girl from the team joined the conversation. She said that because of his unique power, it seemed as if Universe himself looked down on everyone arrogantly. Her gaze was even sterner and more terrifying than that of the strictest knights. The boy, finding himself in an awkward position, began to stammer embarrassedly. He shyly admitted that it was hard for him to find common ground with others, but he always tries to take his duties responsibly. The hero smiled confidently and declared that he did not understand at all what was being talked about. His gaze became cold and condescending, and it was clear that he felt no sympathy for the boy opposite him. With each moment, this became more and more obvious. Universe froze in amazement. It hurt him to hear reproaches from his friends, but they did not stop. They asked what use he was since he had not done anything important so far. The boy was completely confused and asked uncertainly, what will happen to his magical horse in which the spirit lives? In response, the hero just rolled his eyes, and everyone understood that he was up to something bad. The blond boy confidently raised his head and approached the horse standing nearby. He spread his arms wide, smiled slightly, and said that with such an assistant, anyone could easily manage. When he approached the fairy tale horse, he angrily kicked it and shouted, "You worthless piece of iron." The universe definitely did not expect such cruelty, especially from someone on its own team. The boy instantly ran up to his amazing creation and shouted its name, Trans. Slightly hesitating but with noticeable excitement, he addresses the hero who saved this world to ask him to stop all the mockery. The boy did not even notice how his hand ended up on the girl's forearm, who was dressed almost like a nun. The girl cast an angry glance at his hand, making it clear that she did not like it. The next moment, without wasting a second, she suddenly swung and struck him hard right between the legs, making him feel sharp and unbearable pain. The boy grimaced in pain, dropped to his knees, and could no longer get up. The sensation was so unbearable that he seemed to have died. Meanwhile, the girl said something offensive to him, hissing it through her teeth. She had already warned him not to touch her. The girl simply could not tolerate touches from people she found unpleasant. Her face clearly showed anger and disgust. The young man, who had no strength to get up, reached out to the horse lying at the savior's feet and asked, "Is it normal to be transgender?" The hero only smiled lightly and calmly said that Universe always cared more about his own interests than the team's common cause. For the blonde, such behavior was simply unbearable and caused disgust. At that moment, the man's facial expression completely changed. It was clear that some idea had struck him. He raised his head and boldly assured the boy not to worry. They would fix him just like this unfortunate person. The universe came to its senses late in the evening and saw that it was lying on a pile of various garbage. There were simple bags, old buckets, boards, and a whole bunch of other rubbish. When the boy opened his eyes, gray rain clouds appeared before him. They densely covered the sky, making the day even gloomier. It seemed that even nature was against him today. The boy covered his face with his hand. Signs of anger and irritation were already flickering on his face. It seemed that in a moment tears would pour from his eyes like a child. He mentally returned to the thought that in the team of heroes, everyone has their own special mission. The hero must become the new king and show his loyalty to the princess. The warrior is preparing to lead the army of the entire country. The priestess aspires to become a great saint, and the young sorceress, a famous sage. Even the universe itself did not suspect this. Some time passed, and he was already working in a department engaged in the research and maintenance of magical devices. The boy was enthusiastically studying magic. Around him lay numerous books, various instruments, flasks with bright liquids and solutions, and each item served its own special purpose. The boy lightly patted the trance on the side, and with a smile announced that he had finally fixed it. Soon this machine would work again like new. People around turned around in surprise. They did not understand why the boy was so enthusiastically talking to his technology. The boy was walking down the corridor alone. His gaze was focused, as if he was pondering something of his own and did not notice those passing by. In his hands, he carefully held a folder with documents, as if carrying something extremely valuable in it. Walking down the corridor, he suddenly saw something unusual on the wall that immediately caught his eye. Interested, he stopped to look at it more closely. On the wall hung an ordinary bulletin board that did not attract much attention, but right in the center was attached a huge poster with a portrait of the white-haired hero, the very one who recently boldly mocked everyone around. The boy looked at the poster and smiled lightly, as if nothing special had happened, but suddenly he remembered Typhon and wanted to find out what was new in her life. Then he learned that she was getting married soon. The boy decided that if he had free time, he would definitely visit that girl today, and went on. But suddenly he heard someone call him. One of his comrades informed him that the Lord himself was looking for him. When the guy entered the boss's office, he didn't even lift his eyes from the papers. He just quickly glanced at him, and without putting aside his affairs, calmly informed him that he was fired. The boy stopped as if the ground beneath his feet had disappeared. He looked around in surprise, not at all expecting what had happened. Universe asked why Got Swan acted that way. The boss looked away, comfortably sat in the chair, and said that he didn't like this guy at all. He constantly talks to the equipment when he repairs it. He tried to explain everything, but from nervousness, he began to stumble and confusedly told about the spirit that lives inside the magical device. Gutswin didn't even let the guy finish speaking and immediately asked why he spoke so quietly and unclearly. The boss was already tired of listening to his quiet mumbling, and the colleagues even complained that because of this the world seemed gloomy and unfriendly to them. The man's appearance clearly showed that he did not want to listen to the guy at all. However, the guy did not give up and tried his best to explain everything, as he valued his job very much. Gatsuin constantly annoyed the guy, not letting him say a word. He suddenly declared that he was going to erase the universe's name from all the devices it created and replace it with his own. The universes and devices were very much liked by all the clients, so thanks to his efforts, the product received a high rating. The man twisted his face, said that he was going to become an official, and apologized, although there was a sneer in his words. After that, he added that he was grateful for the work done. The sun was shining brightly outside, children were happily running down the street. Adults nearby were busy with their affairs. Some were resting in the sun, others were hurrying with their business. But Universe was not happy at all with this fine day. He was upset and slowly walked forward. He sighed deeply, feeling himself gradually relax, and began to think about where it would be easier for him to find a new job that would match his skills and desires. Suddenly he heard two girls quickly walking somewhere, discussing the news. Today the princess, the spirit of the wind, is finally getting married to the savior who defeated the demon king. The young man recalled his thoughts as he walked down the corridor. He suddenly remembered that he had planned to attend Typhon's wedding, but had completely forgotten about it. The solemn ceremony took place outdoors. The weather was nice. So many people gathered to see the wedding of the hero and the princess who possessed the spirit of the wind. There were almost no people on the square on the hill, only a few of the most respected guests. In the middle stood an arch, near which a bell hung. The spirit of the wind looked confused, as if something was troubling or saddening her. The universe hid under a dark veil, as if trying not to stand out and to become part of the surroundings. He held his breath, admiring the bride. In this dress, Typhon looked truly amazing. The boy joyfully watched the solemn ceremony. With a sincere heart, he wished that the princess, who was the center of attention that day, would find true happiness. The girl with a headscarf from the hero's team cheerfully announced that today they would celebrate the wedding of the princess, the spirit of the wind, and the hero who saved the world. The universe tried not to fall into despair and not to give in to sad feelings. However, it was noticeable that anxiety did not give him peace. The spirits of this world are naturally kind and always happy to help people, as it means a lot to them. They sincerely consider it an honor to give a person an oath of loyalty. However, the boy knew for sure, one should never consider oneself better than the spirits, even if they have already sworn an oath of loyalty to you. It seemed that the princess was increasingly sad and no longer tried to hide her feelings. She lowered her eyes down and did not even look at her fiancé. People saw that Typhon was very worried, but this did not surprise anyone. After all, her husband was about to become a national hero. But suddenly something interested the girl, and she turned toward the crowd. She sincerely smiled at the guests and waved her hand at them warmly. Her friendliness created a cozy and harmonious atmosphere. It seemed that she truly enjoyed meeting these people and even cared about them more than about her fiancé. Suddenly she stopped, overwhelmed with surprise. Her facial expression changed as if she saw something so unexpected that for a moment she forgot all her worries. The universe blushed slightly when he looked at the princess. He even thought their eyes met for a moment. The wind creature approached the very edge, leaned forward and squinted, carefully looking at the crowd below. She could not believe what she saw. It seemed like just a fragile game of imagination. The boy cautiously looked around, trying to determine exactly where the girl's gaze was directed. But when he saw that she was looking right at him, his heart felt warm and pleasant. He smiled, though feeling a slight embarrassment, yet still dared to raise his hand and wave to her. Suddenly, a fierce wind rose, causing people in the square to fall to the ground, and the main character was lifted into the air and even flipped over. It seemed something was flying toward space at extraordinary speed, sweeping everything around with strong winds. It was the princess herself. She was rushing so fast as if flying through the air, paying no attention to anything happening on her way. While people stood confused and did not understand what was happening, the universe realized with horror. The princess, the spirit of the wind, was rapidly approaching him. Even his cloak could not hide him among the crowd and leave him unnoticed. Tears quietly rolled down the girl's delicate cheeks, leaving wet traces behind. As soon as they reached her chin, a gust of wind picked them up and carried them into the unknown. The girl, whose cheeks were touched by a light, shy blush, was already approaching her dreamed goal. The boy spread his arms in surprise, not understanding what was happening, to catch the princess who was very close, only a meter away from him. She joyfully threw herself into his arms, so unexpectedly and fiercely that the boy almost fell and only miraculously stayed on his feet. Typhoon with crazy energy spun around, suddenly knocking people nearby off their feet with its strong gusts of wind. Its roaring echoed all around, and everyone could feel the true power and grandeur of nature. She stopped, tears still rolling down her cheeks. She asked anxiously, if it really was him, then how could he have stayed alive? The young man looked at her in surprise, not understanding why she thought so and where all these suspicions came from. The spirit of the wind told what the hero shared with her. During the journey, the universe simply disappeared, and the future husband of the princess meanwhile lay in the middle of the square, still recovering from what he had experienced. Typhon, with tears in her eyes, confessed that if the universe was really alive, then she saw no point in getting married. Her heart was beating from an excess of emotions, and she could not cope with her feelings. Even the wind around seemed to grow stronger, sympathizing with her experiences. The young man also noticed how the powerful wind easily swept away everything around, not only light decorations and bushes, but even the guards. While everyone around looked at each other in confusion and did not understand what had happened, the princess quietly took the universe by the hand and said that in fact all this did not have such great importance. She raised his hands, looked straight into his eyes, and with hope asked if he wished to run away with her, forget everything that had happened, and set off on a journey where true freedom and many new opportunities awaited them. The spirit of the wind did not wait for the young man to say anything. She confidently grabbed his hand and sharply pulled him aside. There was no time to delay, as the guards were already rushing behind, ready to seize them at any moment. Typhon decisively picked up Universe in her arms and swiftly rushed away from the place of their wedding. Universe, not understanding at all what was happening, held onto the princess in shock and could not comprehend what had happened. After that, he remained standing with a bewildered expression, while the guests, along with the savior of the world, simply sat on the floor and tried to make sense of everything that had just happened. The hero looked attentively at his bride, and petals gently swirled around them. Suddenly, anger awoke in him. His eyes widened, red veins gleamed on the whites. He clenched his jaws tightly, preparing to say something. Overcome with despair and anger, he shouted insults wildly, as if arguing with the whole world. He waved his hand to the people gathered in the square and ordered them to catch the bravest girl in the whole world. The spirits were stunned by his words. How did he have the audacity to speak to them so arrogantly? One of the spirits could not bear what he saw and shouted loudly, calling the name of the hero many times, who at that time was fleeing. Breben looked around confusedly, not quite understanding what was expected of him in this situation, but his spirit added that he could not ignore what the boy had said about his fiancée. Universe and Typhoon ran out into the street, but suddenly their path was blocked by a wedding carriage in which Breben and his bride were sitting. Universe stopped and looked carefully at the symbol that adorned the roof of the carriage. When they approached the device that Typhon found, Visesvit saw a familiar horse harnessed to a cart. This horse turned out to be his friend Trans. When Typhon was already climbing into the carriage, Universe gently ran his palm over his comrade's mane. The girl looked back in surprise and asked where he knew this horse so well, or maybe they had met before. The boy agreed and shared that this magical device was his first handmade work. Trans was with the hero's team from the very beginning of the adventure until the victory over the Demon King. The girl was impressed, but noticed that another name was engraved on the horse. On the magical horse, it was written that it was created by Gatsun, the former ruler of the universe. The boy got angry. How could this have happened? After all, it was his thought, but for some reason he felt no joy. Meanwhile, the girl pulled him away from the horse and called him to sit down quickly with her. The boys climbed into the cart and rolled forward, trying to escape as far as possible from this terrible place. Although this horse had magical abilities, in appearance and behavior it was no different from an ordinary horse. Its hooves struck the ground evenly, like those of a regular animal. At that moment the universe pondered, wondering why the horse said nothing. Perhaps its voice module was simply turned off. The boy assured his friend that he would definitely fix it and remove that terrible inscription. Behind the carriage in which the princess and universe were riding, knights on horseback were already chasing. They did not lag behind a step, pursuing them closely. As soon as the guards began to encircle the carriage, Typhon immediately noticed and called the boy. However, there was no need to explain anything. The boy himself understood that the situation was becoming dangerous. The girl could not hide her upset and disappointment. With tears in her eyes, she exclaimed that if everything continued like this, they might soon catch up with the others. The boy could not comprehend how it happened. He had assembled trans from the best parts that exist in the universe, so he had to be confident in its speed, but something went wrong. Then he looked at the girl, who stared ahead in surprise and a little confusion. Suddenly he realized that the trans is maintained by the powers of the earth spirits, and Typhon embodies the spirit of the wind. Therefore, these forces cannot act fully, because wind and earth are opposing elements. The girl informed Universe that everything had become clear to her, but there was no time to ponder or delay. One of the guards on the horse-thrown chariot was already almost reaching the princess. Typhon saw this and created a powerful gust of wind. This wind was so strong that it turned into a giant vortex, sweeping everything around. It seemed the guard had no chance to escape this danger. Together with his cart, he suddenly overturned and screamed in surprise. The girl quickly threw the reins to the boy, and he skillfully caught them, fortunately for everyone. However, the boy did not even try to steer the horse from the cart, as is usually done. Instead, he instantly jumped and found himself right on the horse's back. Universe approached the horse, gently praised it for good work, and then addressed the earth spirits dwelling in the horse. Universe asked them to help and fulfill his request. Suddenly muffled, strange voices sounded from inside the horse, heard by everyone around. These were the earth spirits. They recognized a familiar voice and decided to respond. Small creatures resembling gnomes cheerfully ran out to meet and showed with sincere joy how happy they were to see their dear friend. They easily climbed over the horse's back, but immediately began complaining to everyone around how tired they were, because this trickster hero constantly made them write something down. When the spirits of the earth saw their master, they were filled with true zeal and a desire to act. They decided to show all their powers and instantly dissolved into the air. Suddenly, the horse rushed forward with incredible speed, as if it had turned into a completely different animal. The cart it was pulling raised thick clouds of dust and knocked down everything in its path. Typhon grabbed the chair, couldn't sit still, and wanted to shout to the universe so that everyone would know they were moving too fast. Suddenly, ahead of the boys riding in the carts, a group of guards appeared. They tried to block the way to prevent the fugitives from going further, but the magical horse was not afraid. It boldly galloped forward and didn't even stop. It delivered such a powerful blow that both the soldiers and their horses with carts were lifted into the air, flew several meters, and crashed to the ground with a bang. From such incredible force, the cart along with Typhon flew into the air, and even the universe, who was sitting on the horse, rose above the ground. They fell to the ground again but did not stop and moved forward. The princess and the boy barely held on, gripping everything they could to avoid falling. Typhon shone with joy and excitement, shouted loudly, and waved her hands, sincerely showing her emotions. She enthusiastically told how incredibly amazing it was and encouraged the horse to run even faster. She inadvertently pressed a button and did not notice how she turned on some device. Suddenly, the wedding sign with the names of the princess and Ribbon rose higher, and from the pipe behind, a loud explosion suddenly thundered and something scattered around. Incredibly beautiful flower petals softly fell on Typhon in the universe, enveloping everything around with a magical glow. In such moments, one only wanted to raise their head and watch this enchanting spectacle in awe. But that was not the end yet. Beautiful devices tied with ribbons slipped out from behind the carriage. They fell to the ground, and at that moment, a loud but pleasant melodic sound was heard. At first glance, everything seemed strange. Typhon, the spirit of the wind, settled on the seat of the wedding carriage. Nearby, Universum sat astride a white horse. The carriage, decorated with flower petals and wrapped in melodies of music, rushed forward. The pastors standing on the other side of the street began to notice the amazing scene unfolding before them. Those who initially paid no attention also eventually looked back, captivated by the melody reaching them. Everyone remained standing where they were, not daring to move. They quietly whispered among themselves about what they had just seen. It immediately became clear. This was the wedding carriage of the hero and the spirit princess. However, what surprised them the most was not this, but the fact that instead of the hero, an unfamiliar young boy was sitting on the horse. The pair rushed past the street where surprised passersby were watching them. Everyone stopped, observing this unusual spectacle. But Typhoon was not bothered at all. She was happy like a child, and the whole event seemed incredibly fun to her. The people also suffered because of their own curiosity. They did not want harm. It was just that the carriage rushed so fast that the powerful wind caught up with them and could easily knock them down. iPhone sincerely rejoiced at this moment, spreading warmth and good mood around. The universe in response only smiled a little, letting it be understood that it liked to see her happy. Suddenly the spirits of the earth approached the wedding plank, adorned with delicate carvings, and began to change something on it. The universe noticed this and started watching in surprise what they were planning. The spirits of the earth joyfully looked at their work and decided to show it to the entire universe. On the sign appeared the inscription, "This is the carriage of love for the universe and its friends." The spirit confidently and proudly appeared before Brabin and resolutely demanded an explanation for why he had previously spoken so harshly and incorrectly. He even repeated the offensive words said by the hero to their princess, as if indignantly wanting to make sure he understood everything correctly. His voice showed surprise, as if he still could not believe that such a thing could really happen. He severely scolded Brabin, warning that he would never allow such treatment of the princess, the spirit of the wind. Even if a famous hero stood before him, such words remain unacceptable. The hero frowned discontentedly and loudly clicked his tongue, showing his irritation. He did not like being addressed that way at all, and believed that everything happening now made no sense, as these spirits were not people to him, so he felt no respect for them. Turning towards the exit, he said that now it was important not to think about this, but about how to catch this creature as soon as possible and conquer the universe. However, the spirit of the wind did not calm down. He again inquired whom exactly needed to be caught if it was not about the universe. Irritation had long appeared on Brabin's face, as this guy would not leave him alone. The spirit continued. After all, it was the hero himself who said that the universe was already dead. The boy froze in place, not daring to turn back to the spirit, and simply listened silently to his words. He turned sideways, showing complete contempt, and began mocking the spirit, mumbling something under his breath and rolling his eyes. However, the boy paid no attention to this. He quickly approached the other spirits, and with a smile on his face admitted how happy he was to see the whole universe. Brabin straightened up, put his hands on his hips, raised his chin, and with pride asked why everyone endlessly talks about monsters. He believes that the real evil is the so-called universe, and for him this word sounds the most disgusting of all. The spirits instantly turned to Brabin, as if something had called them. In their eyes, one could immediately read surprise, which was clearly visible on their faces, and along with it, strong anger that made them scarier than usual. They ran up to the hero and immediately attacked him with questions, whom else he considered disgusting and how he even dared to offend their friend. The boy was confused, not expecting such a reaction, and stretching out his hands forward, tried to explain and justify himself. Angry and full of determination, the spirit of the wind shouted. Typhon agreed to take Brabin as his wife because the universe itself suggested it, and for the sake of all who died during the campaign. Now it turned out that they had been deceived all this time. He promised to conduct a thorough investigation and assured that the hero could no longer be trusted. Brabin grimaced angrily, not understanding why these people were interested in this universe at all. The spirits left the square, warning the hero, if the universe is really alive, he must be ready for the worst. Brabin remained alone and watched them with surprise. Later, Typhon and his partner managed to get rid of the pursuers by turning into the thicket of the forest. The boy stopped and, a little tired, leaned to catch his breath. At that time, the girl cheerfully jumped out of the carriage, as if this adventure had given her a good mood. The spirits of the earth could not hold back tears of joy. They were infinitely happy to see their master alive, because they also believed that he had long died. The universe gently embraced one of the spirits, stroked his head, and thanked him for the support. Typhon was also moved, watching this, and smiled happily. The girl watched cautiously as the boy gently stroked the earth spirits. It was clear to her that in her soul she also dreamed of such tenderness from her friend, but she did not dare to ask for it. The boy saw a silent request in her eyes, so he gently placed his hand on her head and thanked the spirit of the wind. The princess smiled sincerely, and not hiding her happiness, contentedly moved her unusual ears. The universe smiled upon seeing this, but a little later still asked her if she was really sure that she needed to run away from her wedding. The girl got offended, puffed out her cheeks, and looked away, saying that she had already made a decision. She did not run away with someone, but together with the whole universe. If only the boy knew how worried she was when she learned about his disappearance. The princess shyly lowered her head, and a blush appeared on her cheeks. She hesitated uncertainly, trying to confess her feelings to the universe. Although it was not easy for her to say these words, the girl still gathered courage and spoke of her love. It seems the boy did not quite understand the girl's words, but simply smiled in response and said that he loved her too. The girl immediately blushed deeply, was very surprised by his words, and even exclaimed in surprise. The earth spirits now watched the boy confusedly, as if they also hoped to hear some important words from him. The universe immediately understood everything and confessed his love to them. Tiffin looked at the young man with offense. She blushed again and muttered that the universe was simply stupid, but still could not hide her emotions. She was angry at the boy and raised her fist indignantly, preparing to hit him. The boy, in response, raised his hands confusedly, trying to protect himself at least somehow. But suddenly the girl sharply grabbed the boy by the collar and decisively tilted his head toward herself. Tears sparkled in her eyes, and without hiding her emotions, she confessed. She was very glad that the universe was still alive. The young man, with a sincere look, gently embraced the charming princess. He felt how her warmth and trust filled this special moment, and once again thanked her from the heart. Typhon finally calmed down and sat on an old stump by the road. The universe looked at him and asked what to do next. She looked confused and had no ideas of her own, so she asked what he would want. He said that first he wanted to recover and come to his senses, because he felt very bad right now. Universe ran his hand over the inscription on the horse and realized that he could erase it only in the land of water spirits, Concontavary. After all, this inscription was created by powerful fire spirits, so only a water spirit of equal strength could remove it. Typhon jumped for joy and cheerfully agreed to go with the boy. He asked again if she had changed her mind about returning home, but the princess confidently said that if the wind spirits are everywhere, then her native land would still quickly find out where she was. The girl timidly approached the boy and asked again if he agreed to take her with him. He smiled at this and said that he could not even imagine how he could refuse her what she wanted. The princess raised her fist up with excitement and cheerfully declared that everything was already decided. They were starting their journey, and the first stop would be the land of water spirits. Victory awaited them ahead. The boy in gloves was sorting through documents, suddenly found something unpleasant, frowned, and irritably crumpled the sheet as if all the blame lay on him. It was Brainban. He laughed wickedly and convinced himself that he would conquer the entire universe and make everyone obey him. Perhaps Humiliation had broken his mind, or maybe he had always been like that from the very beginning. Typhon leaned forward and smiled warmly, radiating friendliness. She sincerely thanked the earth spirits and noted with admiration that she was very glad to have the opportunity to meet them. However, apparently the earth spirits were confused when the princess, the wind spirit, unexpectedly addressed them. Out of fear, they began to tremble but still managed to timidly respond to the greeting. The universe calmed the boys a little and addressed Typhon. He explained that if the girl followed him, it was important for her to learn to find common ground with other spirits, regardless of their element. He nodded forward and cautiously explained the conditions he was setting. The girl immediately promised to fulfill everything and assured that they could set off right now. And suddenly the universe seemed to whisper to her, "Don't rush." She looked at the young man with surprise, not understanding what was stopping them both now. The young man noticed that Typhon needed to change clothes first, because in the wedding dress the princess was too noticeable among others, and this could attract unnecessary attention. The girl was delighted and instantly rushed to the carriage to change. She was so excited to set off on the journey that she did not want to waste a single minute. The young man froze in amazement, because the girl was changing so loudly that it seemed the whole carriage would fall apart from the noise. Universe X had already greeted and began thinking about what else needed to be done before setting off on the journey. Suddenly he was interrupted by Typhon, who loudly and clearly called him by name. The princess had already changed and proudly showed off her new clothes. She winked at the young man and smiled cheerfully, clearly hoping that he would like her appearance. But first the universe noticed a beautiful bracelet on the princess's wrist. He asked in surprise if it was the same bracelet he had seen on her long ago. Typhon looked carefully at her bracelet and said that she always wore it because she had received this gift from the universe itself. Hearing this, the young man smiled happily at her, although he noticed that the girl seemed to be hiding something and wanted to talk about something. The girl, folding her hands in front of her, asked the young man again what he thought about her appearance. even showing her true self. She really wanted to hear something good from him because this person was important to her. The young man suddenly noticed how beautiful the princess looked and remarked that this outfit suited her very well. Hearing these words, the girl joyfully beamed and sincerely smiled at the young man. The girl admitted that she was very nervous because it was the first time she had tried clothes in this style. However, the young man's words calmed her, and this immediately showed on her face. The young man also said that he was seeing her in this image for the first time. The princess, turning away a little and feeling shy, admitted that during this journey, she would like to show the young man all the traits of her character. But suddenly the girl waved her hand in front of the boy, pointed to the carriage, and asked if he also wanted to change clothes, since there were still many other clothes inside. The universe pondered her words. The pair stepped up to the carriage, and it immediately became clear to them. This was no ordinary carriage. Strong magic spread around in an instant, and inside, instead of a cramped space, a huge hall opened up. He looked around in surprise and saw that he was not just in a room, but in a real palace. The universe did not understand why the hero needed so many rooms, as if he was going to celebrate a honeymoon with 8 princesses at once. Suddenly, the girl by the door called him. She opened the door and saw a large bedroom before her. Tiffin gathered her thoughts a little, then confidently approached the wardrobe and opened it. Inside were many different things. In the room stood a wardrobe filled with precious and luxurious items that immediately caught the eye with their shine and expense. The wind creature, happy and delighted, with shining eyes, asked the boy if he liked these outfits, but the young man looked dissatisfied and calmly asked not to do this anymore. They went outside and talked about how the inside of the carriage looked quite decent, but outside it already needed repairs. Maybe it should be covered with new material, but where to get all the necessary things. However, the universe noticed that many trees were growing around. Tiffin then calmed everyone, assuring that the forest spirits would definitely share their gifts with them. The princess confidently slapped her chest, proving her courage and determination. She persistently asked to be given this task, since the wind spirits were good friends with the forest ones. She boldly grabbed an axe, full of determination, and confidently stepped toward the nearest trees. She wanted to ask these trees for help. But something did not work out. After a brief conversation with the forest spirits, Tiffin became upset, took the axe, and slowly headed toward the universe. Her head was lowered and her appearance was depressed. Tiffin approached the boy and warned that nothing good would come of this, as the spirits would only suffer. He advised them to abandon this idea. The girl, hearing this, became very upset. The universe followed the girl into the forest, thinking it was worth trying to talk to her. Maybe luck would help to reach an agreement, so it was necessary to take the chance. The boy approached the nearest tree and carefully examined it, while the leaves rustled quietly around from a gentle breeze. He smiled, looked at the treetop whose branches reached the sky, and respectfully greeted the forest spirits, hoping they would give him a sign and bless him. Voices echoed inside the tree. These were spirits communicating with each other, and it seemed that among them was the very ruler of the world. The boy wondered how they knew him, and the spirits replied that there was no tree in this country that had not heard about him. One of the forest spirits sitting on a branch explained, "All trees are connected by roots, and it is through this that they can pass important messages to each other." The universe cautiously voiced his request. He was a little shy because he did not know how to properly chop wood so as not to offend the local spirits. The forest spirit joyfully spread its branched arms and said with surprise that the world really was as they had told. Most people do not ask for permission. They just come and cut down trees whenever it is convenient for them. The boy thought probably ordinary people do not see these spirits, and Typhon does not look like a special spirit to the universe. The forest spirit added that it could convey a message from all the trees that people use. The trees say that they are strong and capable of living many years, so they are happy to help people by allowing themselves to be used. They are truly happy to serve people. The axe with a sharp blade and excellent balance effortlessly cut through the sturdy tree as if it were made of paper. It was not difficult at all. The boys placed the log on the stump and prepared to split it. Universe grabbed the tree with both hands, and Typhon, with a sparkle in his eyes, raised the axe, gathered his strength, and struck with all his might. Then the boys, together with the earth spirits, began repairing the carriage, nailing new boards to the very base. When the work was completed, everyone happily exchanged high fives. In the end, everything was ready, and everyone was proud of how well they had done. The universe voiced what everyone felt. He praised that everything was done simply wonderfully. She jumped up with joy again, raised her fist up, and looked the happiest of all. Maybe she was just more emotional than the other spirits and even the universe. The boy noticed a wooden post with shackles in the corner of the carriage. He was surprised and asked Typhone what it was for. The girl raised her head, and unpleasant feelings and even disgust were clearly reflected on her face. She told her comrade that this device was used when the spirit servant made a mistake. The spirit was chained so that he would understand his guilt and regret what he had done. Brabana was very fascinated by this idea. The young man with a serious look said that even the very idea of a hero seemed terribly frightening to him, while Typhon at that moment carefully watched his words to understand what the boy really thought. She smiled sincerely, as if she had been hoping for exactly that answer, but the universe could not understand why the girl was laughing at his words. Maybe he said something wrong. The princess explained that in this world people often consider spirits worthless and look down on them, but she was pleased to learn that in the universe everything is completely different. She smiled sincerely, looking at the boy. The boy said that every person is important to him and every life matters, regardless of which class they belong to. The girl added that the boy always treated even the forest spirits with respect. It seemed she was genuinely impressed by him and thanked fate for meeting such a kind and unusual person. The spirit of the wind sincerely and radiantly smiled at the universe, thanking it for valuing everyone she met on her path. The boy was touched by her words, and when she smiled, he blushed and looked away. He was a little embarrassed, turned away, and suggested to the girl that they should set off already. She quickly agreed, smiled broadly, and happily asked him to go ahead. If the magical horse were in good shape, they could arrive in one day. But now, after he had been far from the world for a long time, they would have to travel at least 3 days. But the man noted that even under the best circumstances, they would have to spend at least 3 days on the road if no surprises occurred. Meanwhile, a man in armor was already visible near the carriage. These were knights sent by Breben to bring his fiancée and former girlfriend. They immediately informed their commanders where the carriage had gone. Typhon felt that something strange was happening and shared her worries with the universe. However, the boy had already understood it too. When only a few meters remained to the border, knights of the kingdom suddenly appeared around the fugitives. They tightly closed the ring, not allowing them to break through and cross the boundary. Typhon and Universe realized that there was no way back. They would have to break through forward, as it was no longer possible to bypass the enemies or retreat. Universe turned to his horse and asked for its help, hoping to get out of this difficult situation. He addressed the spirits of the earth, saying that he hoped for their support as well. The spirits immediately became lively and gladly promised to help. The horse-drawn carriage again moved faster, and the boys hurried forward. The sun shone brightly behind, and the knights on the road by carriage were drawing closer. When there was very little distance left to the carriage, Typhon and Universe confidently leaned forward, preparing to meet the crowd of guards. They thunderously smashed the obstacles standing in their way. Just breaking through forward, the princess bravely climbed onto the roof and directed several strong gusts of wind after them to help them gain an advantage. The girl returned to her seat, quietly thanked the universe, and supported Trans, encouraging him to move faster. Suddenly, the boy noticed something ahead, strained his eyes, and focused on the road. Just on the state border, a wall suddenly rose, completely blocking the way. Beyond it, it turned into stone blocks and hills, a typical landscape for this rocky area. It was not just a wall, but sharp spears standing closely together, arranged so that if someone tried to break through, their horse could be seriously injured. Typhona looked very worried. She anxiously reported that, unfortunately, the Trans would no longer be able to help them in this place. At that moment, the boy had a good idea. He called the spirit of the wind and asked to share its power to help solve this situation. He shouted at the top of his lungs, because at such speed it was almost impossible to hear each other. The boy suggested using the power of the wind to lift the carriage into the sky. The girl whispered with surprise and slight anxiety that she probably would not succeed. But the universe did not back down and firmly insisted on its own. He sincerely asked the girl to at least make an attempt, emphasizing that he truly believed in her and hoped for her determination. Hearing kind and warm words from the universe, her cheeks already blushed a little. She smiled and replied that she would try to fulfill his request, as she could not leave these sincere words unanswered. The girl shouted loudly, cupping her hands around her mouth so the sound would carry even further. She turned to the other wind spirits, asking them to come to her aid. Little lights, hearing the gentle voice of the girl, as if drawn by an invisible force, began to gather one by one in one place. They flew in from all sides, and soon everything around was illuminated by a bright light. The princess carefully stretched her hands forward, sincerely accepting the support of the spirits who wanted to help her on this difficult journey. Typhon looked at the universe with irritation. Her face showed that a little more, and she would not hold back tears because of everything that was happening. The girl could not hold back her feelings, and shouted with pain and indignation that this was completely insufficient to cope with such a difficult task. But the boy did not want to give up. He thought that maybe he would succeed if he called all the wind spirits and gathered them together. Then he suddenly raised his index finger up, as if he remembered something. The universe said, if the wind spirits want to play, let them sit on his finger. The boy used his special ability to gather spirits. This is the skill of a spirit tamer, which allows calling them by simply raising a finger. His cry for help, full of despair, burst from the depths of his soul and echoed all around. The offer that came from space sounded so loud and strong that it could be heard even hundreds of meters away. The spirits immediately noticed this call. At first, everyone was silent and froze in place, carefully listening and waiting for some signs or hints. But in a moment, one of the spirits, unable to endure the uncertainty any longer, turned to his friends with a question whether the universe was calling them now. At that moment, dozens, maybe even hundreds of spirits gathered together in one place, and all in one voice asked one thing: did the universe really call them here? Typhon and her companion looked up in surprise, watching how small lights slowly flew to him at his call. But in a moment, the wind spirits surrounded not only the boy's finger, but also the surprised princess. The boy himself did not expect such a number of spirits to respond to his call. Remembering why he came here, he turned to Typhon with a request to continue. The girl was a little upset, puffed out her cheeks, showing her offense, but still reluctantly agreed to this proposal. She turned to the spirits gathered around and asked them to help lift the carriage on which they were traveling, as it was truly necessary. Light, invisible wind spirits scattered around, dancing near the carriage and enveloping it in a mysterious, magical cloud. These magical air currents filled the surrounding space with a special feeling of freedom and magic. The boys gathered together, filled with enthusiasm and confidence, preparing to take off. In a moment, the carriage wheels seemed to lift off the ground. It was the work of invisible spirits with mysterious powers inhabiting this magical world. Suddenly, the entire carriage, along with the transport, rose into the air. The path was clear. They were finally able to leave this kingdom. The soldiers chasing the fugitives looked up in surprise. They did not expect this. The carriage had already risen high into the sky above them. When the boys flew over the barrier, the night guards could not hold back their loud shouts. Their cries even sounded admiring. For the first time, they had to see an entire carriage rise into the air. Typhon admired the beautiful landscapes with pleasure, and Universe felt relieved, realizing that they had finally managed to get away from those who were pursuing them. At that moment, the boy suddenly stopped. It seemed to him that something flashed before his eyes, causing everything inside to stir and ache anxiously. He felt a strange premonition that made him think, was it a mere coincidence, or was something more happening? Now it was clear that the universe had taken notice. Typhon gently placed his hand over her palm. The young man could not understand why the princess acted that way, so he decided to ask her about it. The girl blushed, her cheeks turned red, and she remained confusedly silent, not knowing how to respond. But suddenly a wonderful idea occurred to her. Typhon warned that it was very dangerous here, and she did not want the universe to perish at all. After telling this, the girl was a little embarrassed and looked away. The boy warmly smiled at her and said that he was very grateful to her then. After that, he took her hand in his and held it tightly. Typhona was overwhelmed with happiness. She shone like a child who had just been given a long-dreamed-of toy. Her smile never left her face, and true joy sparkled in her eyes. Universe looked confidently ahead, and Typhoon smiled softly, enjoying this moment. Now she was worried not about the speed of flight, but that Universe gently held her hand, and even if there are no paths in the sky. Before the fugitives stretched a vast expanse filled with uncertainty and new possibilities. Their carriage, like a fairy tale ship, flew high among the clouds, carrying them away from the kingdom and all its troubles. At that very moment, significant events were taking place in the luxurious palace of the kingdom that could forever change the fate of the entire country. In one of the luxurious halls, where everything shone with elegance and expense, a special solemnity prevailed. Influential persons gathered here for an important meeting to discuss the alarming news, the kidnapping of Typhon. The hero, who was to become the new king, stood with clenched teeth and addressed everyone, asking why no one had yet found either the bride or the one who kidnapped her. He, who once was the Minister of Magic, responded to this, assuring everyone that there was no reason to worry. He said that soldiers equipped with the latest technology, which he personally created, were on duty at the border. They only had to wait. Braden sighed with relief, but his face still showed anger and anxiety. Suddenly, a soldier entered the office and reported that the carriage with Princesses Typhon and Universe had broken through the guard. Now the fugitives were already far beyond the kingdom's borders. Gatsvin suddenly got up from the chair. This news caught him by surprise. He was so upset that he even slammed his palm on the table. He could not believe that such a thing was possible, and asked about it. The knight awkwardly explained that their crew had simply flown through the sky, bypassing the new installations and all the guards. The Minister of Magic did not believe a single word and remarked that it was not worth leading him by the nose. In his opinion, crows cannot fly. He also suspected that perhaps something had been done to the knight, forcing him to say nonsense, but in response he heard a firm denial. Then the future king struck the table with his fist and exclaimed, "He understands absolutely nothing." Raven immediately guessed that Typhon had used the power of the wind to lift their carriage high above the ground. Gatswin instantly covered his mouth with his hand and, after regaining composure, agreed rather uncertainly. In fact, the minister hardly understood what it was about. He placed his hand on his heart and said that, as everyone knows, the magical horse for this carriage was created by the minister himself. Then Braben added that Gatswin did not understand the situation at all, since he had let them go so easily, and asked what he planned to do next. After an awkward pause, the Minister of Magic sincerely said that he had nothing special in mind. He just wanted to emphasize what a wonderful horse it turned out to be. Brabant looked confused. But he only laughed and admitted that he actually really liked this mission of catching zombies. Gatswin suggested sending postcards with their portraits all over the world. That way everyone would learn about them, and the hunt for the head of the universe would begin, regardless of whether he was alive or dead. And then Brabant would only have to wait until his goal was achieved. After that, a meeting with Typhon took place. The future king once again struck the table hard with his palm. From this sudden movement, Gotson flinched, afraid that he would now get a beating for an ill-expressed opinion. Yet Brabant praised the minister and said with a joyful smile that this idea was simply wonderful. Gats finally felt relief and sighed lightly. He really wanted Brabant to understand and support him, so he was very nervous when sharing his feelings. They had already started composing missing person announcements, while Brabant believed he could not feel greater shame than when Princess Typhon ran away with that world. He crossed his arms over his chest, thinking everything would end quickly. Deep down, he was proud of himself and the work done. His face shone with a smile that resembled a cunning expression. The very next day, the streets became crowded again. Everyone returned to their usual concerns. Brabant was riding his carriage through the narrow city streets. He was increasingly anxious and eagerly imagined how the city residents would react to the news about the search for the kidnapper of Typhon's bride. People looked at the new announcement with interest, but there was a feeling that something was wrong. Next to the poster created by Gatswin, another one appeared. The residents looked at the two announcements in surprise. One was searching for Typhon, who was lost somewhere in the universe, and the other, for a dangerous thief who kidnapped the Princess Right during her wedding. Even the photographs in these announcements were completely unlike each other. On the poster not made by Brabant and his ministers, one could see a smiling Typhon. She was cheerfully standing next to her friend and seemed very happy. The possible future king, nicknamed the Frozen Horror, was completely unprepared for such a turn of events. Brabant looked somewhat clumsy, and it seemed people joked and laughed at him when arguing about Kura. Where the truth lay, even the newspapers themselves could not figure it out. The men pondered among themselves what really happened. It seemed as if everyone decided, no one kidnapped the princess, she simply voluntarily left with some universe. Hearing this, the heroine got angry but barely restrained her feelings. However, the men did not stop. They continued discussing that it was a disgrace to lose the bride. In their opinion, Raven turned out to be weak because he could not maintain a relationship with his girlfriend. The townspeople burst out laughing and began saying that even they could have done better. The girls standing nearby also exchanged glances and laughed. Even the women close by could not hold back and laughed loudly along with everyone. The hero could not bear it and screamed in fear. He was hurt to hear how they called him weak. How could they treat him like that? The man returned to the palace, opened the office door with irritation, and loudly called for the Goth, demanding that he appear. However, a whole crowd of spirits who supported Typhon in the universe had already gathered in that place, and among them was not his minister. As soon as Brabant appeared, everyone immediately turned to him, demanding an explanation of what was happening. The ghosts held the same posters as those in the square. The hero was surrounded and told that now they understood how he solved all problems, because from the beginning he knew that their friend universe was alive. They also asked how to correctly interpret the inscription on the announcement, which was about searching for the living or the non-living. No one could calm down because it turned out that Brabant was not a hero at all, but a simple deceiver. And was it this man named Wirt who painted the portrait of Princess Typhon at someone's request? The King of Spirits will definitely be angry because this guy does not know what conscience is at all. When everything between him and Typhon is destroyed, it will be interesting to see how Brabant behaves in this situation. Filled with rage and furious anger, Brabant pointed at the spirits and began to humiliate them, claiming that they were exaggerating the problem and therefore the alliance should not be destroyed. After that, he also could not hold back his emotions. He spread his arms and shouted that the universe was a real impudent person. After these words, he laughed loudly. The hero could no longer restrain himself, and sharply said that if he wished, he would erase the entire country of spirits from the face of the earth in an instant and bury them all together. Hearing these words, the offended guards of Princess Typhon silently turned around and left the room, leaving the strange young man alone. Breathing a sigh of relief, he raised his eyes upward. He realized, if he had done this earlier, he would not have wasted time on these unnecessary conversations. He had already done something. Then he headed to the distant doors, passing through the dark corridors of the castle. When he entered, it was dark around, and in the middle of the room sat a man wearing a crown. He reported that he had just received a letter from the other world, stating that their alliance had fallen apart. The boy did not expect such boldness and simply froze in place, while the king sternly demanded explanations from him about what exactly was happening here. Raben tried to find justification, explaining that all this happened because of the audacity of their ministers and the sins committed by the spirits. But the stern, silent man did not allow Breben to finish the sentence. He sharply interrupted him, and one short word made the insolent youth fall silent. He stood like a little boy who had just been severely scolded, and with a confused look, he looked at his father, not understanding why he received such a harsh punishment. The king announced that after the victory over the demon lord, all states recognized their power. Now they only had to subjugate the spiritual peoples, and then their country would become a great empire that would rule the whole world. Such a chance could not be lost. The king declared that he was also canceling the engagement with the spirit's daughter. Breben looked at his father in confusion, not understanding how he could calm him down. The king clenched his fist and declared that if his son did not agree, he would personally restore the alliance, and after that, he would expel his worthless son from the palace. Breben stopped in front of the door of his father's office, and at that moment, the heavy door sharply closed behind his back, leaving the boy in complete loneliness and confusion. His face twisted with surprise and distress. He did not understand why his father called him helpless and worthless. The hero was surrounded by spirits who looked down on him. In their eyes was visible contempt, as if they did not even want to notice him. It seemed they very much disliked his presence. The man bowed low, inclining both his head and body, showing respect to the people before him. With this gesture, he expressed both his sincere repentance and asked for forgiveness. He barely managed to say that he sincerely regretted and asked for forgiveness for his harsh and rude words. Inside, he was burning with rage and despair, but he tightly pressed his lips, not letting his feelings burst out. Only one idea remained in his thoughts. He would not allow this ruthless world to take away Princess Typhon from him, for she was too important to him. The spirits only quietly laughed. One of them stepped forward and said on behalf of all that they were waiting for sincere apologies. The hero raised his head, his eyes flashed with anger. However, realizing that this was not the place for such emotions, he hurried to put on an awkward, forced smile. He proudly said that he would not sincerely apologize if others did not even bow their heads in response. They want him to be open, but they themselves do not show even a little respect. The spirits immediately took offense at these words and began to consult among themselves on how to deprive him of the title of hero. They also added that he needed to apologize not only to them. It was very difficult for the hero to keep himself together. Veins even appeared on his face from the tension, and he only pressed his lips harder. The question spun in his head, was he really just a nobody to everyone? But he did not dare to voice this aloud. His hands trembled as he touched the floor and took the pose that the spiritual servants demanded for a sincere apology. The young man, who fell face down on the floor, promised that he would definitely return the universe to his homeland. He sincerely apologized and begged not to break the alliance. The leader of the spirits again noted that Breben had confused everything. Apologies should be asked not from them, but from the universe and Princess Typhon. The demand to apologize to those who caused his misfortunes only made the hero angrier. He raised his head and said that he would definitely ask them for forgiveness when he returned home. After all, if he apologized now, they would not be able to hear it, so there would be no sense in it. One of the spirits said that now was the time to apologize and try to explain his words. However, for them the most important thing was to make sure that the hero said it from the heart. Breben was furious, gritting his teeth. He felt like he was being mocked. How could he apologize to those he considered worthless? For him, it would be a terrible disgrace. He convinced himself that they were not here and would not be able to hear what he said. Then he barely dared to ask the most important thing for himself, whether the alliance would remain valid if he apologized to the spirits. The minister stood before him with his head held high and assured him that unlike him, they always kept their promises. The boy squatted down to calm himself and admitted that he was wrong. He promised never to force Typhon to do what she did not want to do again. Even if she made a mistake again, he would not blame her. In submission, he asked her to return. The spirits froze in place upon hearing these words, as they learned something new about the relationship between the princess and Brabin, which they had not even suspected until now. The boy suddenly realized that he had said too much. He was confused, bit his lip tightly, and hot red blood immediately appeared on it. However, the hero ignored it, paying no attention to the wound. He continued to speak, asked her to return, and explained that he had been treated unfairly. To convince her, he called her back to affairs and even promised to free Gatsunan and make the boy a minister. The hero was incredibly nervous because for the first time in his life he dared to sincerely say words of apology. Due to the tension, red veins appeared in his eyes. These were small capillaries that burst from restrained anger. The hero tried to smile, although he felt unrest in his soul. Meanwhile, around him, souls gathered near the mysterious device and excitedly shared the joy of success. In despair, Brabin pointed to that device and asked what it was. The spirit explained to him that it was a magical device that transmits all spoken words directly into the universe. The spirit explained that unlike photographs, this device perfectly captures movement and sound. At that moment, a video appeared on the screen where Brabin was apologizing. The spirits were slowly fading away, and the hero remained sitting on the floor, bewildered by what he had experienced. Meanwhile, the others were excitedly pondering how to ask their journalist acquaintance to spread this recording all over the world. Suddenly the boy jumped to his feet and, resembling an angry beast, began to scream and growl strangely. He lunged at the spirits, who, frightened, scattered in different directions. He sharply grabbed the minister, who was holding a mysterious device in his hands. When asked why he was doing this, the man explained, he intends to destroy the device because if everyone finds out about it, his good name will be ruined. Other spirits looked at the boy with contempt. They took the device in their hands and could not believe how he, looking like that, could behave that way at all. Brabin began to justify himself in despair, saying that he was simply set up. The spirits left the sad hero, assuring him that peace and friendship between them once again prevailed. But the hero still found no peace. He sincerely begged to remove the shameful video with his apology. As soon as the spirits turned around and left, Brabin suddenly fell on his back like a small child, began flailing his arms and legs, rolling on the floor, and whining that all this needed to be stopped and removed immediately. Meanwhile, the carriage with the fugitives was moving through the lands of the kingdom of Aswampu. Typhon suddenly rejoiced and shouted that a pond was already visible ahead. The girl was excitedly jumping in place and sharing what she saw with her friend with a smile. Her eyes reflected delight as she looked at the shining lake ahead, and the moment itself seemed special, as if the whole world was rejoicing with them. He said that Vampu is famous for its beautiful ponds and lakes. Here is the largest lake in the world, so huge that it seems like a sea. When the girl found out about it, her joy became even greater. She said with a smile that she definitely wanted to see this miracle with her own eyes. The universe pondered and realized, indeed, Typhon is the princess of the wind spirits, who has never traveled beyond her country. The young man replied that although it was not exactly on their way, they would still stop by to take a look. The princess smiled happily, thanked fate, and also sincerely expressed gratitude to Trans for driving them. When they reached the place, their attention was immediately drawn to a large bright poster that enticed tourists. Behind it stretched a beautiful large lake that impressed with its beauty. Typhon confidently headed towards the water. On the shore of the lake, people were rejoicing and dancing. Some were enjoying cocktails, others were preparing a delicious dinner. Loud laughter and cheerful music spread across the entire beach. The girl was surprised that it was so fresh and cool around. People in swimsuits were calmly passing by nearby, and right in front of them a path stretched all the way to the lake. But the universe did not seem thrilled with this place and wanted to leave as soon as possible, yet said nothing for Typhona's sake. The princess, full of determination and enthusiasm, extended her hand to the boy, inviting him to join the others and spend the evening together in good spirits. The boys had already plunged into merriment when suddenly a stern man behind them called out. They stopped and turned to the stranger. The man in the hat and dark glasses was smoking a cigar solemnly and advised them not to hurry, but to stay here for now. Elokvat was responsible for the lake. He raised 2 fingers and said that the entrance for each costs 10,000 enda. This amount already includes a barbecue set and other necessary items. So for 2 people, Elokvat immediately asked for 20,000 enda. The universe and Typhon froze in amazement. The boy couldn't hold back and asked, "Why is the price so high?" He glanced, smiled, and said that every hero has his own price to pay. The universe seemed to have stopped. The young man remembered that this is exactly what price tags are called for everything related to heroes, and the price for such things was truly astronomical. He imagined in his mind how much posters or plaques with Brabant's face could cost. The man asked if the universe was like a child. He inquired whether it really did not have 20,000 enda. In response, he heard only silence and sighed heavily. Lok made another proposal that greatly angered the couple. He promised to have the price if they brought a girl in a swimsuit with them, and if that girl was also attractive and stylish, Lok even promised to give something extra. Princess Typhon conceived something important. Her eyes shone, and she confidently began to change the course of events in the universe. The girl asked him to wait a little, and she quickly ran to the carriage they had arrived in. Lecuate and Universe patiently waited until the princess finally approached them. She sincerely apologized for the delay and explained why she made them wait. She proudly showed off her new look shayly. Now it was clear, the girl had simply quickly changed into a swimsuit. The lake manager was delighted with how she looked, and her companion was even momentarily taken aback by the surprise. The swimsuit perfectly highlighted her figure. Kavat, moved by the beauty he saw, with tears in his eyes, raised both thumbs up and exclaimed that it was simply incredible. He allowed the boys to go and rest. Typhoon confidently strode forward and sang along contentedly, while the young man slowly followed her, looking around attentively. When they appeared on the beach, all the men immediately turned their gazes to the charming Typhonka, completely ignoring the one who accompanied her. They gathered around her, bombarding her with questions, whether she came alone, where she was from, and if she wanted to stay with them. One boy asked if spirits really want to help people and what she liked most. But the girl broke free and ran to the universe, hugging it tightly. The universe remained confused, not fully understanding what was happening, and said that she serves only him. He turned away and thought that he had probably said it too harshly. Suddenly he noticed with surprise and amazement how all these boys glanced at him with dissatisfaction, then quickly dispersed along the beach. Typhon gladly took Universe's hand, pressing firmly against him. She was happy to have openly told everyone her story. Universe sighed with relief, realizing that one worry between them had disappeared. He suggested moving forward, and the girl, smiling happily, readily agreed. She smiled warmly and suggested to the boy to take a walk together to enjoy the beautiful scenery since they were already here. The young boy noticed that those guys were still saying something about them and rudely pointing fingers. After that, he finally agreed to the girl's proposal, and they calmly moved on. When they finally reached the shore of the lake, Typhon could not hide her admiration. For the first time in her life, she saw such a beautiful and picturesque view. The girl felt a slight chill near the water, but she still felt cozy. The universe advised her not to get too close to avoid getting dirty. The boy explained that he was wearing ordinary work clothes, and they were soaked with the smell of grease. However, the princess was not confused at all. She was confident that everything was going right, as this became confirmation for her. The universe truly interacts with spirits. Smiling contentedly, she hugged her companion even tighter. He could only quietly and uncertainly say her name. But suddenly their conversation was unexpectedly interrupted by a loud sound. The girl's stomach growled, and everyone immediately understood that she was quite hungry. Typhon blushed and lowered her eyes, but the boy took it calmly. He noticed how loudly someone's stomach growled and realized that they had not eaten anything since early morning. And then, since they were already here, he suggested cooking barbecue together. The girl nodded in agreement, and impatience appeared on her face. She was already dreaming of trying something tasty as soon as possible. The couple approached the place where the tables for preparing barbecue stood. They chose a set of ingredients called mazan, which contained many different components. Typhon said with a smile that she had already prepared everything while the guy was lighting the grill. When the charcoal began to smolder, the guy announced that he had also prepared a grill for cooking food. He confidently laid pieces of meat on the grill, and an appetizing smell of fried food immediately spread around. The food smelled so delicious that even those sitting at neighboring tables could not take their eyes off it. Juicy meat, fish, and even shrimp were grilling on the barbecue. Their juice dripped directly onto the hot charcoal, causing it to crackle cheerfully, and the air filled with an unparalleled appetizing aroma. The group next to the couple barely restrained themselves from trying those tasty dishes, yet they did not dare to approach because they did not want to appear as beggars in front of others. The universe served Typhon the ready food and warned that the dish was still hot, so she needed to be careful not to burn herself. The girl, anticipating the deliciousness, sincerely thanked the guy. She speared a small piece of meat on the fork, from which steam was still rising, just taken off the pan. The juice slowly dripped from the piece and fell right onto the floor, vividly showing how juicy it was. Typhon brought the piece of meat to her mouth and tried it. After the first bite, a satisfied smile appeared on her face, and her cheeks turned slightly pink from the hot food. She held the meat firmly with her teeth and chewed slowly, trying to savor the wonderful taste as long as possible. When the girl finished eating, she exclaimed with delight that it was incredibly tasty. It seemed that her mouth watered, and real little stars began to sparkle in her eyes. Typhona ran up to Universe with excitement, her eyes shining with joy. She sincerely admitted that she had never eaten anything tastier in her life. Universe initially awkwardly replied that she was probably exaggerating a bit. Smiling, he gave her another portion and advised her to try something new. The girl looked at the plate in surprise, on which lay an unfamiliar dish. Typhoon brought some seafood and immediately noticed that the shrimp were very meaty. Then she tasted the mollusks, noting their tenderness and enjoying the wonderful flavor. When she tried everything, she smiled with satisfaction and, licking the tip of the fork, said it was a real delicacy. People on the beach saw how the girls were enjoying their dish, and they also wanted to try such shashlik. The universe noticed this and pointed out that others had too much fire, so their shashliks did not turn out as tasty. The boy did not stop preparing seafood on the barbecue, occasionally remembering that they needed to be grilled over hot coals, not flames. However, this was not the most important thing. His thoughts were entirely elsewhere. The universe responded that it was precisely thanks to the spirits of fire and forest that their barbecue turned out unparalleled, and sincerely thanked everyone for working together. The boys stepped aside, and the spirits of the forest and fire began to discuss whether it was worth considering this boy. The fire spirit continued the conversation, complaining that people often think they can light a fire on their own, and because of this, she has to endure human misunderstanding. She turned to the forest spirit, asking if everything she said was correct. The forest spirit agreed with her and added that it would be wonderful to have a barbecue again with Mr. Universe. The fire spirit also expressed this desire, but noted that it is impossible without Mr. Universe. The boy said that when you combine the powers of different spirits, you become stronger and gain new skills. For example, if you take the spirit of fire together with the spirit of the forest, you can warm yourself and cook delicious food. The universe hints, when you unite forces, remember that some spirits may not get along. It is better not to force them into actions, but politely ask for cooperation. The boy remembered how he once appealed to the spirits to help them reconcile. Using his spirit tamer abilities, he made them understand each other, become friends, and since then they have been inseparable. The girl called the boy to her and asked him to open his mouth a little. The boy obediently did so, and she carefully put food into his mouth with a smile using a fork. Typhon said that since he had already prepared the food, let it feed him too. Then he asked if it was tasty. The boy, chewing, nodded to the girl in response. The boy thought the taste was completely different from what he expected. Raising his eyes to the sky, he imagined that the moss from the lake looked like the most delicious steak in the world. Turning around, the boy noticed a bright poster on the wall. The poster depicts a man in a raincoat holding a large fish in his hands. Several other people stand next to him. Above their figures is a list indicating the results of the fish catch by weight. The first place is held by a fish weighing 70 kilograms. The boy thought as if he himself had photographed this moment. Typhon stood with a plate and fork in his hands, looking up at the sky, and the boy felt that he had to respond to his silent call. The universe smiled and promised that this time it would give her a real Mazan. The girl stood up, was a little confused, and asked the boy if it was really Moza. The universe replied that she was mistaken. All this is really happening, but there is something even more interesting in this lake. The boy standing next to the heroes asked ironically whether they were going to catch anything at all and whether they were capable of it. He also made a joke that one could die from a Mazan bite, hinting that one of them just wanted to show off in front of a friend. Then the boys began to argue among themselves about what his fate would be. One suggested that he would drown, and the other that he would be bitten by a Mazan. The boys agreed the one who won the argument would get Typhon. Everyone agreed, and a few more people joined the game. The girl looked at the boys indignantly. The universe quietly went to the lake and sat by the water's edge. The universe addressed the water as if talking to an old friend and greeted the spirit, noting that their meeting had not happened for a long time. The boy asked if he could join them again this time, like before. The water responded to the boy's words. A round face appeared on the surface of the water. It was the spirit of the lake. He smiled kindly at the boy. The spirit of the lake addressed the universe and asked if he was the one who called him, and it turned out that he was. Then the spirit said that he had finally come. The boy smiled in response and looked at him. The spirit of the lake informed that he had just prepared a delicious dish for the boy, Mazan. However, he warned that this fish could be dangerous, so he advised keeping away from it. The spirit explained. If the boy wanted, it would be enough to snap his fingers, and the Mazan would appear nearby. The boy nodded and said he understood everything. The boy stepped away from the lake. The people standing further away called out to him. They wanted to know if he had already given up. the universe smiled and snapped his fingers. Small air bubbles appeared on the surface of the water. Suddenly the lake swirled, and the water spun in a strong whirlpool. Big fish jumped out of the water with a splash spraying droplets around. The universe, not showing surprise at the bricklayer's action, simply calmly rejoiced at the successful catch. Typhon was also pleased, happy to have the chance to try something new, but the other guys could not believe their eyes, so impressed were they by the size of this fish. The Amazon, who was almost 1.5 times taller than an average man, approached the shore where the hero stood. Behind her, amazement and various questions from others could be heard. The guys behind pointed at him in surprise, not understanding how he managed to catch such a fish so easily and in such an unusual way. They even mocked his strange fishing a little. But the boy paid no attention to these jokes and only smiled in his thoughts, knowing he caught the fish thanks to the help of spirits. Typhon crossed her arms on her chest with pleasure and, looking admiringly at the hero, praised him for his coolness. The boy held the fish firmly by the tail, and next to him the girl joyfully jumped with excitement. Suddenly, a group of girls in swimsuits cheerfully ran up to them from behind. The girls gathered around the heroes and began flirting with the boy. They praised him, saying that anyone who caught such a huge mousefish could not be bad. They really liked that. But Typhon looked at the girls with disgust and contempt because of their frivolity. The guys weighed their catch and could not believe their eyes. The fish turned out to be heavy by hundreds of kilograms. They began to enthusiastically praise the fisherman, saying that only a true hero could manage such a feat. The youth showered him with compliments, convincing him that they had always believed in his skill and never doubted him for a moment. However, the fisherman easily recognized their flattery and looked at the guys with contempt. The guys cheerfully and jokingly invited Universe to join them and share as well. The guys, together with a knife, lifted the fish and began to pull Mason towards them. But suddenly Typhon noticed this, called out, and sternly ordered them to stop. The girl angrily and irritably pointed her finger at them and sternly asked who gave them permission to eat it. Typhon frowned, shouted loudly, and asked what the universe had caught for her, simultaneously pointing at herself with her fingers. One of the guys replied that the catch was too big for the two of them and asked why they did not share everything with the others. But the girl confidently refused. The girl indignantly reminded the boys how they laughed at the universe even before they divided the fish, and emphasized that they should remember their words. The boys only exchanged confused glances, not understanding what she meant. The boys looked away confusedly, not daring to look at Typhon as they felt embarrassed. Feeling guilty, they knelt before the heroes and sincerely apologized, assuring that it would not happen again. The girl sternly defended the main character, said she did not feel sincerity in their words, and ordered them to apologize once more. She demanded that the boys bow their heads even lower and bow simultaneously, and the boys silently complied with her demand. Tiff frowned and declared that she would not meet with Amazon until she heard perfect apologies. The boy just smiled and laughed confusedly in response. The girl raised her hands and loudly demanded to be apologized to once more. The universe, watching everything from the side, wondered how Typhon had developed such a knack for making remarks. Now a fresh image appeared on the poster. In the foreground, a huge Mazan weighing 100 kilograms, and behind it, the expanses of the universe and Typhon are visible. The universe was preparing the carriage for the upcoming journey. The main character invited Tiffany to walk ahead, and she cheerfully agreed. But suddenly someone called out to them, and the girl looked back with curiosity. The young men and women with whom the heroes spent time on the beach warmly said goodbye, sincerely thanked for the pleasant moments, and promised that they would definitely tell the legend about the mysterious universe to other people. The heroes settled in the carriage, waving farewell to those who saw them off. The sun slowly disappeared behind the horizon. The universe said it gave people only fish skins. Typhon sadly admitted that she did not like it because she was human and did not like such food, but the boy reminded her that people often actually enjoy eating fish skin. The boy said that his biggest catch became a real record, and he hid the remains in a magical freezer. The girl, raising her hands joyfully, said that it was incredibly cool and that she felt this happy for the first time in her life. The universe watched them closely and seemed pleased that they stopped right at this place. The girl looked at the hero and also gave him a smile. Typhon tilted her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. The girl mentally thanked the universe for this moment, and they continued writing together. The boy noticed that it was already late and time to rest, as there was a comfortable bed in the carriage. The sun was already beginning to rise over the horizon. The boy noticed that they had started to be actively searched for, and if they stayed in the wagon a little longer, someone might suspect that they were stolen hero cards. Hearing this, the girl looked at him in surprise. Typhon looked at the boy and said that with him nearby she was not afraid of anything, no matter where they were heading. The universe, looking at the road, replied that they needed to make a stop in a field. The boy thought for a moment, then changed his mind and suggested another place. Nearby was a village he remembered well from the times when he was in a squad fighting demons. To prove everything, he proposed to stop there, in the village near the famous Aiden's well. The girl happily clenched her fist and declared that that was exactly where they would go, so now their path was the village of Aiden. Between the quiet houses lay a path that led through the forest to the mountain top. There stood a lonely well, from which eerie sounds occasionally echoed. In the city of Aidan, people gathered near houses, strolling in large groups. Statues stood near the homes themselves, and on a large poster was an image of a boy who called himself a hero, together with a girl. The universe and Typhon walked through the city, enchanted by everything they saw around. The boy stopped and asked if they had really reached the place they desired. The girl only smiled and noticed the large crowd of people around. The couple carefully examined the statue and began talking about it. The girl asked if it was, by any chance, the hero depicted. The boy replied that it seemed so. Suddenly, the girl noticed, under the hero's foot was the cast face of the boy. On the plaque under the statue was written, "Great hero and fool of the universe." The girl then became interested. Maybe under the hero's foot the whole universe was depicted. The boy nodded, somewhat confused, in response. Typhon sadly approached the boy and said that all this was very bad, and in reality the world was completely different. The boy, closing his eyes, tried to calm her and said that it was just a small misunderstanding. The universe pointed forward with his hand, as if inviting to go further. The girl frowned, puffed out her cheeks offendedly, and turned away. A man with a bucket walked past the girl and accidentally brushed against her. The villager immediately apologized, and the girl smiled and said it was not a problem. As he walked away, the man muttered something discontentedly about the water from the well. Hearing this, the girl only lowered her gaze to the ground. In one village lived a boy who sincerely believed that he was a true hero. He was very proud of himself and thought that his time had come to become famous, as there had never been such a wonderful and attractive hero before. Typhon, seeing this boy, was surprised and even frightened, and the girl immediately hid behind the universe's back. The universe, with a displeased look, glanced at the people among whom this hero stood. The boys approached the people and greeted them. The people turned around. Among them was a man with a cane and a scarf on his head. He immediately recognized Universe. Universe stepped back a step, but Typhon was already standing behind. An old woman pointed her stick at the boy and asked those present if they recognized that fool. Universe immediately got confused and began to excuse himself, saying it wasn't him. But the woman only smiled slyly, and on her smile there were as many teeth as fingers on one hand. She confidently said that it was indeed him, and even joked that the boy came clean, not even bringing dust. The old woman's face was distorted with disgust, and she said that Lady Aiden's spirit was angry at the whole universe. Meanwhile, stories about the heroism of the man he saved in the village had already spread around and began to attract new people to him. Universe was a little confused, but still asked for permission to stay here for the night. At these words, the old woman sharply interrupted him. She angrily said that Lady Aiden was in a bad mood right now, and the well in the village was almost dry. The woman added that if they let Universe stay overnight, it could turn into a real disaster for the village. The old woman leaned on her stick, turned away, and announced that she would now organize a meeting between the hero and Lady Aiden. She hoped this would help Aiden finally cheer up and get down to new exploits. The boy thought for a moment, because if this meeting took place, some misunderstanding might happen. At that moment, Typhon was watching them behind with interest. The girl thought that this hero was not at all the person she dreamed of. She looked over Universe's shoulder. The hero noticed her gaze and began to boast, trying to make an impression. Typhon grabbed Universe by the cloak and realized with horror that all her hopes for another hero had just melted away. Standing before her was exactly the one she could not tolerate. Universe invited the grandmother to the meeting. However, this angered her even more, and she declared that he had completely lost his mind. The villagers turned to the old woman, considering her their leader. She turned to them and asked what had happened and what they wanted. The people explained that last time the forces of the universe helped them, but that help was not at all what you imagine from a true hero. The hero approached the villagers and thoughtfully ran his hand over his chin. He said that if they gave the boy Aiden and allowed her to do whatever she wanted with him, maybe the world would become a little better, the old woman reasoned. The hero pondered, furrowed his brows, and asked if this could be considered a true sacrifice. Then he added that after this, he would throw Universe into the barn like an unnecessary rag. Suddenly, an elderly woman approached Universe and offered him to stay the night with them. But before that, she said, he needed to meet Lady Odina. A group of people was climbing up the slope. At the front was a man with a lantern. Right behind him walked the main hero. On both sides walked two more who were carrying the village elder. At the end of the procession, following the others, were Universe and Typhon. The girl addressed Universe and asked if these people were really heading to her. Meanwhile, the boy turned toward Typhon. The girl said she had a bad feeling. It seemed these people did not come with good intentions. The boy smiled at Typhon and asked her not to speak like that, explaining that Edon was just a spirit, and partly they ended up here because he himself once failed to clarify an important thing. Hearing this, the girl opened her mouth in surprise and looked at the boy. The old woman shone a flashlight and said they were already at the place. In front of them opened a well, next to which stood a small wooden building resembling a little temple. Around the well were arranged statues and posters depicting a hero holding a girl in his arms. Despite the people around, the well seemed a dark and troubling place, and strange sounds echoed from its depths. Everyone standing nearby froze in surprise and could not utter a word, while an old woman gently pushed Universe in the back, as if ordering her to come closer to the well. Universe stared intently at the well, not uttering a word. The boy stepped closer, and Typhon glanced at Universe but also remained silent. Suddenly loud sounds came from the well, and everyone around froze in amazement. People looked with horror towards the well. Suddenly a black hand emerged from the dark water, followed by a head with long black hair. Something otherworldly climbed out of the well. The girl hid her face behind thick hair, and only one eye was visible from the darkness. Her gaze combined horror and anger. She slowly reached out her hand to the people. The girl made a painful facial expression, opened her mouth, and stretched out her hand forward. Her hair flew in all directions, and emptiness was visible in her eyes. The girl suddenly screamed, and the boys immediately started running away from her. In fact, the dark-haired girl was just waiting for her hero. She aimed at one of the boys, and he, noticing this, turned around and screamed in fright. The girl suddenly lunged at the hero and knocked him off his feet, throwing him to the ground. Passers-by looked around in surprise. Someone anxiously called for help. The boy ended up under the girl, grimaced in horror, and screamed. The girl firmly grabbed the hero with one hand, while with the other she was already preparing to strike. Someone invisible kept poking the boy in the face again and again. He couldn't stand it and shouted, calling someone for help. The old woman, overwhelmed with fear, begged Lady Aiden to stop when she saw her beating the hero. She pointed at the boy, saying, "There he is, that foolish Universe." The woman stopped beating the hero and spoke, slowly pronouncing the name of the Universe. By that time, the hero had already fainted. Miss Eden looked around and smiled slyly, finishing the pronunciation of the young man's name. Universe and Typhon silently watched Odon. The spirit woman quickly approached them, and Typhon, frightened, took the boy by the shoulder. Suddenly, Mrs. Idon's face became warm and bright. She raised her hands and sincerely, like a true gentleman, greeted Universe on his return. The girl immediately rushed to the boy and hugged him with joy. Typhon froze in place, opening her mouth in confusion, and all those standing behind her were simply silent and could not believe what was happening. Long ago, a group of heroes came to the village seeking help from the spirit of the well to defeat the Lord of Demons. But the traitorous assistant of the hero named Ugavers poisoned the well. Lady Idon, the spirit of the well, became very angry. But as soon as she saw the hero, all her rage evaporated. Out of deep love, Lady Odina promised to remain faithful to him forever. When she returned to the present moment, the girl sighed slightly irritated, looked at the boy, and loudly called his name. Miss Aiden suddenly rushed at Universe, but the boy did not lose composure and calmly stayed in his place. Typhon called the boy and hurried to help him, but suddenly her eyes changed, something new flashed in them. The girl watched as Lady Aiden approached Universe and warmly embraced him, greeting him. Tefana was surprised when she looked at them. Lady Ada looked nothing like herself. She appeared as a little girl. Her ears resembled gills. Her hairstyle was short, not long hair as before. She was dressed in a kimono with a large bow on the back. She spoke about herself in the third person, rejoicing at the meeting and marveling that they had met again. The hero finally regained consciousness and shuddered at what he saw around. Lady Ada said she had always remembered the Universe and thought about him every night. Typhoon was irritated by what had happened behind his back and asked with surprise how she even dared to hug him. The villagers and the village elder silently watched the events, not hiding their surprise and confusion. The old woman trembled with excitement and asked uncertainly if Lady Aiden really did not feel hatred towards the whole world. Mrs. Odon turned around and replied to the old woman that this was not true at all. On the contrary, she loved the Universe very much. The old woman, a little agitated, said that the hero himself had told her so. Mrs. Odon assured that she would now explain everything as it really was. The four, together with the main hero, stopped near the old well. The hero loudly addressed the spirit of the well, saying that he had come for him and wanted him to come out, but no sound was heard in response, and nothing happened. Brabin's face flared with anger because he was ignored. The girl in the headscarf turned to him and handed him a vial of poison. Universe joined their group as the fifth member and helped carry the equipment. The hero carefully poured the poison into the well. Then he looked up at the sky and quietly, with a note of reproach, remarked that the universe was late again. Suddenly, an angry Mrs. Aiden emerged from the well. She suddenly attacked the hero, but he only defended himself and told her to stop. The girl placed a bribe on the ground in front of him, and he again asked her to calm down and stop. Universe saw all this, but could not explain anything about what was happening. Night fell over the city. Lady Eden was poisoned, and she curled up, quietly crying. Universe stayed close to her, not leaving her side. She tearfully said that if things continued like this, even the water in the village wells would be poisoned. The boy with a sad face admitted that he was ashamed of his actions and did not even have the courage to ask her for forgiveness. Then he unexpectedly asked for only one thing. The girl quietly asked what exactly he needed. The universe addressed the sky, inviting spirits, and asked the girl if she was ready to help him. Lady Eden raised her eyes and silently remained waiting. On a dark night, numerous fireflies flew around Lady Eden. In their soft light, she saw small spirits resembling fairies and said with surprise that these were probably the spirits of spring. The little creatures surrounded her and healed her from the poison with their magical light. Lady Eden immediately felt the poison leaving her body. For Mrs. Eden, the universe became a true prince who saved his princess. Everything around seemed to be illuminated by a magical light. The boy extended his hand to her, assuring that now everything was fine and it was time to move on. The girl took the prince's hand and confidently stepped forward. Miss Aiden and Universe held hands and together rose into the sky, gently looking into each other's eyes. Hearing this story, the locals became angry and started to protest, not understanding how the hero could act this way. They also noted that after all this, Lady Aiden became fond of an ordinary worker. The girl, not letting go of the boy, addressed the people and said that she had already revealed the whole truth to them, then asked why they did not believe her. Mrs. Aiden placed her hand on the girl's forehead and carefully lifted her bangs. Underneath was a mark, a hieroglyph meaning goodness. The girl suddenly began to glow, and bright light spread from her small body. People hurriedly covered their eyes with their palms, trying to hide from the dazzling radiance. They said that Lady Aiden's sign, a symbol of the lady's power, now shines at the highest fourth level. The girl joyfully admitted in response that she felt true happiness because she was able to return to the university again. Lady Aiden raised her hands up and loudly said that she felt an unknown power within herself. The villagers carefully looked in the direction she pointed and held their breath. Suddenly, behind the girl, water unexpectedly burst from the well in a large fountain. The local residents who were on the street were very surprised. All the wells in the city began to fill quickly because there was too much water. People rejoiced that the hero had lifted Mrs. Aiden's spirits again. One of the locals suggested that perhaps the woman became happier precisely because the unlucky hero got a scolding. While everyone was discussing this, Riaben quietly tried to disappear from the scene. Lady Aiden explained to the village elder that all these rumors were untrue. In fact, she was not just fascinated by the hero, but interested in the whole world around him. The girl confidently stated that as long as the universe was beside her, she felt true joy, and her source of happiness would never run out. People bowed their heads before Lady Edon. The man felt relief because all disputes finally disappeared, but suddenly someone grabbed Universe by the hand. The boy turned around to see who had approached. Taifun gently hugged Universe from behind. She blushed, puffed her cheeks, and looked away from the boy. Universe looked at his friend with surprise and asked why she was worried. The girl trembled slightly and answered quietly. Taifun took the boy by the sleeve, blushed, lowered her gaze, and quietly said that it did not bother her at all. The village head turned to Universe and knelt before him. She sincerely apologized for her rudeness. Universe was confused and a little embarrassed, replied that nothing terrible had happened. The old woman smiled and thanked Universe. She said that he had become both their master and a true hero because he saved their village. She invited him to stay and feel at home here. The leader nodded to the boys and led them, promising to show the way to the hotel. One of the boys looked back over his shoulder and glanced at Lady Eden. She calmly sat on the edge of the well and thoughtfully looked at the sky. Lady Ada said sadly that she could not leave the well. The boy smiled and promised that before he left the village, he would definitely visit her. Miss Aidan smiled warmly in response to the apology that came from Universe. When they approached the hotel entrance, they were greeted by a smiling girl in a kimono. She welcomed the guests, wished them a pleasant stay, and informed them that the hotel had not yet opened, so they were the only visitors there now. The girl led the couple to the room and confidently declared that she was the best here. Taifun immediately glanced around the room and began spinning on the floor. The girl told the hero that this hotel was famous for its baths. Here you could immerse yourself not only in indoor pools, but also swim in open ones under the sky. At that moment, Taifun went out onto the balcony and looked down. Taifun inquired of the girl about the open baths. The boy suggested they go swimming together, and Taifun gladly agreed. The open bath was decorated with wood, and the water in the pool was so warm that steam rose above it. The boy calmly lay in the bath together with the little spirits and said that he felt very comfortable here. He praised the spirits for their good work that day, while they happily splashed in the water. Hearing a sound behind him, Visesvit became interested and looked back. He saw an unfamiliar boy approaching him. The girl, wrapping a towel around her head, confidently headed to the bathhouse and smiled. The boy looked at her with surprise. Visesvit angrily reminded Taifun that this was a men's bathhouse, but the girl replied that the women's bathhouse was empty now and she would feel very lonely there. The girls came closer, sat next to him, and asked if he minded if they also sat here, since there were no other people nearby. The boy was initially surprised but agreed. Taifun slowly dipped his toes into the water. The girl immersed herself in the water and sighed happily, as if all her fatigue immediately disappeared. The boy smiled and remarked that a lot had happened to them today. The girl agreed, and Tiffany confessed that she felt real fear when she thought the hero had changed and become completely unlike himself. The girl looked ahead and noted that the hero's aura was nothing like what it should be for a true one. The boy pondered her words and also directed his gaze forward. Visesvit replied that he had heard people and spirits perceive the world differently. Taifun looked at the boy. The girl suddenly jumped up and pointed forward, deciding that the fake hero might have gone there. Near the bathhouse, a crippled boy Brebin sat on a chair, and nearby on the ground was a girl. The boy's face was badly swollen. The boy lightly nudged the girl with his foot and asked why she was taking so long, ordering her to hurry. The girl quietly agreed and obediently followed his instruction, as if before a true hero. People around quietly exchanged words. They said Mrs. Etten had taught him a good lesson, and quite truthful rumors circulated about the hero. Meanwhile, the imposter sat, and the girl carefully brushed dust from his face. Then suddenly she froze. The resident grabbed the girl by the hand and advised her not to do this, suggesting to go back. The girl wanted to say something to the guy but remained silent. The beaten hero got angry, shouting curse words. He was outraged that someone dared to contradict him, as he considered himself a true hero. The boy stood before the self-proclaimed hero and said, "How can you defend the person who insulted Mrs. Eden? If she gets angry, the well might dry up again." Rabin abruptly jumped up from the chair and loudly threatened to drive all their families out of the village, since his parents own this land. The boys, not reacting to this, simply kept walking forward without even looking back. Only the girl paused for a moment and turned around once more. The boy got angry, puffed his cheeks in anger, and began scolding those who lived near the well. The water in the well suddenly surged upward like a fountain, and the hero flew into the air with a scream. He shouted fearfully that he might freeze and asked for help. The university and Tafona stood aside and watched as the hero flew over the river. They joked with a smile that swimming in this place was quite pleasant, and the surrounding scenery was truly beautiful. The girl wiped her hands and said with relief that she was incredibly lucky. Now she wouldn't have to become the hero's wife and wash his back. The thought made her very happy, and the boy looked at her and smiled. The girl came to her senses, shuddered sharply, took some water, and suddenly offered to wash the boy's back. The boy was confused and did not expect such an offer. The universe reminded her. Just now she assured herself that she did not need support from anyone. The girl said that it was only the hero's problem, as he behaved disrespectfully towards the spirits. The universe is completely different, and she wanted to thank her companion for his kindness, even if it was insignificant. Typhoon smiled and once again offered the boy help. The boy pondered, raising his gaze to the sky. The boy quietly asked for it not to hurt too much. The girl nodded in agreement. He sat on the chair, wrapped in a towel, and waited for her to start rubbing his back. The girl knelt beside him, rubbing his back with a slight smile. Meanwhile, Typhon carefully watched his scratched back. The girl suddenly flinched and took a step back, quietly saying something about the boy's back. The world around did not notice this and remained indifferent. Typhon looked at the boy's back and asked why it was covered in wounds. The girl asked why there was a scar with the word "stupid" visible on the boy's skin. Universe began to explain that during the war with the demon lord, he was constantly used as bait, having to open chests first that often turned out to be traps during treasure hunts, and sometimes anger was simply taken out on him. As the boy shared his story, the girl's face grew increasingly sad. Typhon could not endure what he had experienced, and approaching from behind, hugged the boy, trying to support him. The girl could not hold back tears and asked why he, having so many painful experiences of his own, still tries sincerely to help others. The universe smiled and said that the matter was not at all about his body. In fact, he was worried that the spirits he was responsible for, as well as the inventions he created, would not be harmed. That is why he tried so hard to protect everyone around. The girl listened attentively, tears still rolling down her cheeks. The girl gathered her courage and promised that now, since she was nearby, she would definitely take good care of him and personally ensure the cleanliness of his body. The boy turned around and could not believe what he heard. No one had ever explained to him so clearly how the universe works. The girl, together with her little helpers, eagerly began to wash the boy. The boy could not hold back laughter. He felt very ticklish and happy, so he asked to stop washing him. The girl laughed and sat beside him, still smiling. The boy was the first to enter the room and confessed with a smile that he had laughed himself tired, but had relaxed well. Now he only had to spread out the futon before Typhon returned. Universe was walking with closed eyes, wiping his hair with a towel draped over his neck. But suddenly he opened his eyes and froze. He was filled with surprise. Around the boys sitting on the futon, 7 enchanting girls in robes were arranged. The girls addressed the universe, calling him their savior, and decided that tonight they must protect him. One of them smiled and asked him to accept their sincere gratitude. The boy stepped back in surprise, trying to distance himself from the woman's hands. The girls carefully laid the boy on the floor and stood nearby. One of them bent down and took the belt off his robe with her teeth. She looked at shyly, then carefully unfastened his belt, revealing his stomach and chest. The girl lightly touched the boy's stomach. At that moment, the entire universe seemed to close its eyes and began to beg for salvation. Suddenly, the girls rushed to different sides of the room, trying to stay as far away from the boy as possible. The girls suddenly began to fall out of the window. Typhoon decisively used her magic to protect the world from intrusive strangers. The boy turned to the girl, straightened his cloak, and sincerely thanked her for the rescue. Tafona stopped in front of the boy, looking at him in the eyes with confusion. Her cheeks flushed, and her hand nervously grabbed the collar of her robe. The boy was about to say something, but the girl quickly interrupted him. Typhon knelt down, bowed her head, and quietly said that although her strength is rough, she asks to be cared for. The girl smiled, her cheeks slightly pinked, and she looked at the boy with curiosity. Typhon told that the universe had always cared for her, and now it was she who had to take care of it. She really wanted to do this for it. The boy looked at her in surprise, and the girl became shy and averted her gaze to the side. Suddenly, Typhon quickly moved from the floor to the futon and suggested staying near the boy at night, promising to guard his sleep so that he could rest well. The boy asked the girl irritably if she even understood what all this meant. The girl calmly replied that she did and slowly took out a book. Phoenix turned the page and saw a chapter about night watches. She began to read aloud and said that first she needed to put the boy's head on her lap. Then the girl closed her eyes, raised her chin, and quietly called the boy to lie down with her. The whole universe seemed to fall onto the girl's lap, and she was momentarily confused. However, she quickly recovered and began to look in the book for what she should do next. She called to ask if he was comfortable. She said she was interested in this question before moving on. The boy simply remained silent in response, indicating that he was fine. The girl thought for a moment, then said she had to tell some nice night story. Typhon wondered what exactly she meant. Seeing this, the girl smiled and began her story. The boy calmly lay on her lap and listened attentively to her story. The little girl wrinkled her face and began to share a story told to her by an acquaintance, a spirit named Fukai. According to her, as soon as night falls, the portrait in the music room starts behaving very strangely. The girl suddenly became confused. She felt embarrassed, began to fidget a little, blaming herself for not being able to tell stories interestingly. But at that very moment, a memory surfaced in her mind. The boy closed his eyes and asked the girl if she thought that night stories were about ghosts. Then he got up from her lap and accidentally hit his head hard. The girl moved away from the boy a little and began to move her legs because they had gone numb. Cramps made her grimace in pain. The universe seemed to stop for a moment to watch her behavior, and she smiled faintly. The boy returned to the girl and saw that she was already sleeping, quietly snoring. Smiling, he quietly said that she fell asleep so quickly, like a little kitten. The boy looked at the girl and smiled warmly at her. The universe pondered and realized it hadn't felt such joy for a long time. He began to spread a blanket, and the girl, even in her sleep, whispered thanks to the boy and confessed that she felt very good beside him. The boy silently looked at her and spread out the futon. The universe gently covered the girl who was sleeping and quietly thanked her for her heartfelt words. Outside, deep night had already fallen, so the boy wished his friend good night. Morning came, the boy woke up and began to get up from his futon. Looking around, he noticed that everything looked as if the world had turned upside down. Universe stepped onto the porch and began looking around, searching for Hafen. He was dozing on the old broken wall, and around him lay many fallen leaves. The young man carefully lifted the girl into his arms, trying not to wake her. While he held her, the village elder quietly approached them, calmly greeted them, and wished them a good morning. The old woman nodded and recalled how yesterday this couple was having a good time. She said that today they have already started the repairs, and Mrs. Eden is trying her best, so everything is going well. The female spirit addressed the workers and said that these signs would also be useful to them, after which she gestured forward. Typhon began to wake up. The girl looked ahead and, as if detached from the whole world, wondered in surprise what kind of unusual scene had opened before her eyes. The chief said that he liked the painting and explained, "It shows the Uniat rescuing Lady Eden." The old woman added that the villagers always drank water from Lady Eden's well. The leader explained that the happiness of all the inhabitants depends on how happy Ms. Eden is, and only now did she realize this. Grandmother bowed deeply to the hero and said that she would no longer give him honor. From now on, she would bow only to Lady Eden and her favorite Uniers. The universe was confused and asked that this not be done anymore. The leader gently smiled at the boy and explained that she had come from Lady Eden. She asked to tell the universe to definitely visit this lady. Hera, Typhon, and Universe were climbing up to Lady Idona, discussing the new posters that had recently appeared in the city along the way. The girl noticed that on one of the posters she resembled the spirit of the earth, named Nuru Kiara. Typhon smiled and said that many people really liked this spirit, and the boy added that to him she was already the most beautiful. The boys approached the well, and on the opposite side stood Lady Eden. The girl stood with a sword in her hands and addressed the universe, calling it the ruler. Miss Eden began to tell that the girl was holding the legendary sacred sword, which was taken from the well, and asked the universe to take this sword with it. Typhon stepped back, stunned by what had happened, and began to speak. The universe's companion began to share an old legend. If you pull the sword out of the borehole, water will start to gush from there, and the sword itself will turn into a water sword. They say that with this sword, you can cut even the moon with one stroke. Lady Odna closed her eyes and agreed that the girl was telling the truth. The universe asked why she decided to give him such an important thing. Then he explained, if the hero himself had asked for this thing, he would no longer be able to return Lady Adon's sword. The Lady of the Wells began to tell that when they had just set out on the journey, the hero again asked her for the sacred sword. She refused, and then the hero decided to poison the well once more. This time the poison was much stronger than before. The boy asked in surprise if it was true that the hero had poisoned Lady Aiden's well again. The spirit lady told that in order to survive and protect the village, she had to fall asleep right in the water, at the very bottom of the well. The lady stood at the very edge and explained that this was exactly why she allowed the well to dry up. The heroes listened silently, and Adon did not interrupt. She smiled at Adon and said that yesterday she watched his actions and was once again convinced. He is the one who must receive the holy sword Idon. Lady Odon's face changed sharply. She looked worried. Taking the sword in her hands, she insistently repeated that this thing belonged to her, but now asked Zidovik to always carry it with him. Typhon only looked at the young man sympathetically, and also asked him not to refuse Lady Odon's gift. The girls asked many questions, and the boy tightly gripped the sword with both hands. Universe carefully looked at the weapon, trying to discern its details. The universe looked at Lady Aiden, smiled kindly, and promised to treat the sword she gave him with care. Mrs. Aiden finally calmed down, slightly tilted her head to the side, and warmly smiled at the young man's words. The spirit of the lady from the well smiled and said that everything was fine now. She remained at the very edge of the well. The girl spread her arms, and her figure began to gradually dissolve into a bright shimmering glow. The boys watched this with surprise and could not understand what was happening. Meanwhile, Typhon called Lord Ada. Lady Ada slowly rose into the sky, her silhouette gradually disappearing into the air. She smiled gently and promised that they would definitely meet again. Typhon anxiously said that the lady knows. As soon as she gives the sword, it will disappear. The universe anxiously called to Lady Odon. Meanwhile, the spirit calmly watched everyone and smiled. Almost disappearing in the bright light, Eden sincerely thanked everyone and said she was happy to have met each one. After that, she said goodbye. Fona stretched out her hand to her and exclaimed that she should not leave, because now they had become friends and could not just part like that. The boy looked sadly at Mrs. Idon. Somewhere in the mountains suddenly sounded a loud girl's cry. The sun slowly hid behind the peaks, and evening silence descended on the earth. The boys were walking towards the village. Typhon was quietly sobbing and wiping tears from her cheeks from time to time. The universe silently walked, settling beside her. Suddenly, one of them turned to Typhon and asked why she was crying. Looking back, the girl was surprised when she saw Lady Aiden sitting by the well. Typhon loudly called Aiden, and the spirit noticeably flinched from the surprise. Typhon, stunned, pointed at Adon and exclaimed that she had died. The boy silently watched everything, his mouth agape in astonishment. Lady Adon replied that yesterday she really felt so bad that she wished for death, but today she feels extremely happy because she finally met the universe. The lady spirit smiled and said that she was no longer bound to that well where the legendary saber lay. Now she can freely move from one well to another. Lady Aiden thanked the boys for daring to take on such a difficult task with the sword and was pleased with their efforts. Meanwhile, Typhon barely held back tears, feeling as if she had been deceived. And the universe, as if watching from the side, rejoiced and laughed because now everything had fallen into place. The man with the gaunt face in uniform nervously tapped the mechanism with a screwdriver. It was hard for him to believe that his great mentor Gatsu had been dismissed from his position and appointed minister of the universe. In his mind, he kept repeating, "This is simply impossible." Gatsuin stood by the car fixing a part, thinking that he had finally earned this job honestly. However, fate cruelly deprived him of it. Now he had to correct not only his own mistakes but also others, including disguising false heroes among them. The man anxiously leaned over his invention and mentally promised himself that he would definitely improve it. This time, everything should work out with the grill machine. On the riverbank among the green grass, an arched column with a plaque welcoming King Vasvamp was installed. Guards stood by the arch and announced that all spirit weddings were cancelled, but the celebration in honor of the hero continued nonetheless. One of the knights explained that this holiday was held in memory of the victory over the demon lord. Goatson played with barbecue tongs while the guards quietly whispered among themselves, wondering if this meeting could really be considered diplomatic. Rising, Goatson sincerely thanked the king for coming. At the table sat an elderly man with silver mustaches, wearing a colorful beach shirt. His face looked confident and heroic. Gyukun said that for dinner, they would prepare dishes from the best vegetables and products grown with their own hands. All of this would be grilled on a grill they made themselves. King Vasvamp smiled and said that it was really interesting since this was the last work created by Minister Gotsfun, the most famous magical engineer in the entire world. Gatsman said he had heard many complaints about how difficult it was to control the fire on the grill. Therefore, he decided to show everyone how to do it properly. Taking the tongs in his hands, he confidently explained that everything here is simple. You need to lay out the products, turn on the device, and in a minute you will get shashlik like a true hero. The king was very surprised by these words and rose from his chair. The stranger offered the king to test the new technology himself, just turn the mechanism's handle. The king agreed, grabbed the handle, and turned it, after which he noticed that it resembled an ignition system. Suddenly, the equipment exploded right in front of the king himself. Everyone around froze in surprise. Flames engulfed the king, and he screamed in pain. People anxiously called His Majesty, trying to help. Meanwhile, the king jumped into the water to escape the fire. The king's vassals became angry and accused Gotz's servant of attempting to kill Magded. They believed it was all a conspiracy. First, he convinced the king to return the pen, and immediately after that the king fell ill, and the healer began treating him. The man raised his hands and tried to explain that it was a misunderstanding and no one planned an assassination. He recalled how he tested the device at home, and nothing like that happened then. Now he became curious. Why did everything go wrong just now? The spirits behind bars, filled with resentment, replied that Gatswin supposedly started the entire universe and later claimed all the glory for himself. The spirits of fire and forest became angry, their faces darkened, and they said that such an insult is unforgivable. The vassals suddenly rushed to Gatsavan and shouted that he would finally punish him as he deserved. Gatsavan fell to the ground in fear, covered his face with his hands, and began to shout loudly. Then suddenly someone called out to the men. The king wiped his face and said that even the most talented geniuses can make mistakes like, for example, Gozen. The vassals stopped and turned back, calling the king. He paid attention to them. Gotsuan began to justify himself before the king, saying that he regretted it and was not to blame for what happened. Gotsun, kneeling down, confessed that he was not the one who created this device. According to him, the real inventor is a master from the same world who kidnapped the spirit princess. Gotsun even staged an emotional scene and shed a tear, trying to absolve himself of responsibility. He insisted that he was not guilty of anything and claimed that this invention helped conceal the traces of the king's murder, about which he supposedly had no idea. The king asked with surprise, "You yourself said that you invented the grill, and even your name is written there." Hearing this, the man realized that his lie was exposed. The hero stood up from the chair and urged his comrade not to humiliate himself, but to openly admit his guilt. Guts could not believe what he heard from someone he had previously considered a friend. Braben glared irritably at Gottsvan and thought that this helpless minister needed to be removed immediately, as everyone was in danger because of him. The accused nervously bit his nail and sank into his thoughts. He recalled how, after the victory over the demonic lord, he and the hero organized a barbecue, celebrated every day, and even for fun burned isolated universes. Gottsson began to tell that all this happened by Breben's order. He confirmed they really needed to impress people by setting them on fire using a special barbecue device. Gatson behaved arrogantly and shouted at him. The enraged Brevin stepped closer and sharply asked what he meant. In response, Gatson said that he would understand everything himself now. Then he suddenly grabbed the hero by the neck and pulled him close. Gotvin quietly told the hero about his plan. He explained, if they admit guilt, they will have to answer personally. All this is done to get closer to the king and enter the circle of trusted persons of Vampu. The hero could not comprehend what exactly Gotvin meant. After that, Gatswin emphasized that it was important to pay attention to the young look of the royal clothes. If the outfit looked stylish and modern, it would definitely appeal to him. The king himself only silently stood aside and watched what was happening with disappointment. After the agreement, Brayman and Gatson began to play out their cunning performance. Brayman enthusiastically praised the shashlik, calling it the best invention of modern times, and deliberately said this very loudly. Gatson picked up this game, pretending to be surprised, and began shouting words of admiration in response. The hero approached the king, put his hand on his shoulder as if they were old friends, and with a smile said that even such a stylish man as he knew about it. Another character also put his hand on the king's shoulder and exclaimed lively, "Well done, that's how it should be." But instead of the expected surprise, King Vasvamp coldly and emotionlessly accused them of cruelty. He stated that they bring only pain to people, do not even try to ask for forgiveness, and perceive arson as an ordinary game. He continued speaking with a smile of superiority, emphasizing that even the hero, who once saved the world, and the outstanding magical engineer turned out to be actually very unpleasant and difficult people to communicate with. After the king's words, Breben and Gotswin could not believe their ears. Deeply shocked, they could not properly object, only muttered something incomprehensible and official, moreover in raised tones. His Majesty, also rising from his seat, announced that the man who asked for asylum in their country had already been caught. He noted that he wanted to discuss this news precisely during the joint barbecue, emphasizing the importance of this meeting. Finally, Vasvamp said that he would pretend that this meeting never happened. He added that he wanted to think about relations with their country, clearly showing that he was very disappointed and had no intention to continue cooperating with them. As soon as the master left, Brabin suddenly shouted the name of the mechanic wizard so loudly that his face twisted with rage and hatred. Angry about what had happened, he began reproaching Gatson for complete helplessness. Moreover, he noted that from the very beginning he should have controlled everything himself and not relied on anyone else. After resting a bit, the boy with light hair calmly remarked that usually the engineer could have already been fired. But now there is a festival going on in the city, so he did not finish his thought, pondering what punishment would be given instead. Now the man was demoted. Instead of deputy minister of the Department of Magical Devices, he became only an assistant minister. This is how Brabin decided regarding Gotswin. He could not believe what he had just heard. He did not expect at all that he would be demoted. When the celebration ended, Gatswin walked down the street sadly. Walking alone, he remembered how his son dreamed of becoming a minister, like his father. It hurt him to realize that he would not be able to tell his family about his humiliating demotion. He feared possible ridicule, so he would not share this even with his closest ones. The man decided that it was not worth talking about this during the festival. He assured himself that he would remain a minister until the next rotation, so he concealed everything that was happening now. These thoughts encouraged him, gave him confidence, and ignited the desire to regain what he had lost, so the boy decided to devote himself to the cause 100%. In a good mood, he walked to his office when suddenly he heard quiet voices behind slightly opened doors. He carefully peeked through the crack to find out what was happening there. With his own eyes, he saw two men putting on a real show. They respectfully greeted a puppet that resembled Mr. Universe with the news that it had been appointed minister. And then, smiling, they began to assure that they had always believed in him and that he was much better than that Gotsween. The peeper got angry because of the words he heard, jumped up, quickly went into the office, and began angrily reproaching others for throwing garbage where they shouldn't. He especially emphasized that this doll should not end up here. Hearing the noise, they turned around and immediately recognized the familiar person. With an ironic smile, they addressed him as the minister's assistant, as if checking whether he had accepted his new, less honorable position. The frightened Goths began anxiously demanding explanations. How did anyone even find out about their secrets? In response, it was said calmly and firmly. Someone among them had told everything to the nun, who saw everything that happened at that unfortunate feast. One of those present said he learned about that man's demotion through his recent behavior. Now Universe had received the position of minister, and that was why their strange ritual with the doll was only preparation for an important meeting. The man could not bear it and exclaimed that it does not matter, since he still remains their leader. Suddenly, an unfamiliar man enters the room and strikes Gottsven. In pain, Gottsven screams loudly, and the newcomer calls him a loser in response. Entering the room, the man introduced himself as the new manager. He immediately noticed that the man sitting on the floor did not show proper respect to the authority and demanded to be addressed according to his new position. After several blows from April, the ex-minister fell to the floor and could no longer hide his pain. He could only scream loudly. Meanwhile, malicious jokes about his helplessness and failures echoed around. He grimaced from unpleasant sensations and was so offended that he decided to return to his place and retaliate twice as strongly. However, in response, they only ironically thanked him for his efforts, smiling as if his threats were worthless. Poe understood that his new subordinate hardly had any chances. Therefore, he asked him ironically, would Mr. Vesesvid agree to appoint as minister someone who once mocked him? The answer, of course, was obvious. The new chief calmly said that after the conversation, they all decided together to beat him up. He also added that even the universe itself would be glad if his offender were punished. He said that these actions completely overshadow all previous insults they had ever inflicted on the master, and with a slight ironic tone, added that now it was their turn to act truly Gatsujinski, specially emphasizing this word. Gatsuin finally realized that he was in the same position that the entire universe once was in. He was overwhelmed with despair and could not hold back. He shouted at the top of his voice. Succumbing to these strong feelings, Gatsuin promised that from now on he would do all the hardest and most unpleasant work for Apple. The irritated leader harshly ordered the subordinate to leave the room immediately. He did not mince words and allowed himself offensive remarks. His loud, angry shout immediately showed everyone how much the authority of the former minister had declined. A convoy of carriages drawn by mechanical horses was traveling along the road. Their artificial joints rhythmically creaked in time with every movement. King Vasvamp sat in the carriage and thought with disgust about how he had never imagined how terrible people sometimes become heroes. His words sounded bitter and disappointed because of such bad people. The servant respectfully addressed the king and said that they had already reached the border. Then he asked to pay attention to something nearby. There was anxiety in his voice, although he tried to remain polite. The ruler glanced out the window and was amazed. The soldiers stood in such a way that from above they formed words and a whole sentence. It said that the universe was to blame for everything, so the ruler can now return. Vasavampa's mood changed sharply. At first he was surprised, and then in a moment he became very angry. He could not stop thinking about how those who offended him did not regret their actions at all. At some point, he felt he could no longer endure it. While driving on the road, he noticed a sign, ahead is Lake Ricado. The enraged king ordered the steward to immediately erase all offensive inscriptions and leave no trace. The man replied irritably that everything had already been cleaned up. Looking around, Vasvamp suddenly saw a sign where a young man and Princess Typhona were drawn. He was genuinely surprised when he recognized the same boy in the image of the universe. It made a strong impression on him. At that moment, the man next to him asked if he was familiar with this boy. The man enthusiastically told that this boy is not ordinary. He is a famous traveler around whom many legends have already formed. Here they even preserve one of such stories. The king, noticeably impressed by these words, inquired what exactly incredible story they meant. The narrator gladly shared that this boy not only masterfully prepares unique dishes, but also managed to set a world record by effortlessly catching a huge masavna. Thanks to these victories, he managed to surpass Brabant and become the first. When the king heard this story, he sadly noted that despite all these circumstances, this man still remains guilty of kidnapping Princess Tayfon. The master asked the man nearby if he had character, because if so, then all this was just nonsense. The girl standing next to them smiled and said that they would get along very well, like true lovers. The passerby noticed that the princess fiercely defended Universe, as if all the mockery was directed at her personally, and another girl from the crowd enthusiastically emphasized that such a relationship looked extraordinarily beautiful. The king again carefully looked at the picture, where a boy and a princess were depicted. He remembered how the young master once caught the biggest masavna, and this memory brought a smile to his face. And for now these two are traveling in a carriage. The girl asks her companion if it is possible to drink water from the ponds. He replies that he has heard, in most cases, this water is suitable for drinking. He also noted that in ponds where spirits live, the water always remains clean. If you drink from such a pond, fatigue quickly passes and strength returns, which is especially useful for travelers. The princess suddenly became more lively and guessed that the universe gained its strength exactly like that during campaigns. She became curious about what it tasted like. But he replied that he gained his strength without water, and such an answer greatly surprised the girl. It was then that Typhon had the idea. If none of them had ever tasted such water before, it would be interesting to try it. She herself had not yet tried it, although she really wanted to. All right, let's head to the river. He recalled that near the road where he stopped during the walk, something was located. This is the very source of souls. The girl rejoiced, her face lit up, and she happily suggested going there quickly to try this magical water. The Typhons travel through the expanses of the universe, and their mechanical horse trans carries them to their goal. The girl admits that she desperately wants to drink water from the fountain because she is so thirsty that her throat has dried up. The spirit hid somewhere in the forest, and now finding it has become much harder than when the boy came here last time. During the battle with the Lord, they spent a lot of time searching for it. Today, all the attention of the universe is focused on an unusual structure in the distance that looks like a majestic statue. It was difficult to determine exactly which statue it was. The main character noticed that this strange statue is excellent for finding the right place. However, in a moment, something else caught his interest. His gaze was drawn to an ancient temple with an inscription that it is the cathedral of the source. While the main character tried to understand how much everything had changed here, Typhon meanwhile had already greeted someone. The doors of the building opened, creaking and screeching loudly. A tired nun appeared from the doors. She politely greeted the guests, calling this house a refuge for the spirits of spring. But when her gaze stopped on one of the travelers, the nun suddenly changed. The calm disappeared from her face because she recognized an unwelcome guest. Seeing Universe, the girl could not contain her indignation. Her hands trembled with anger. She reproachfully accused the boy of audacity for daring to appear in this sacred place and irritably demanded an explanation of what he was looking for here. While the first man was barely audibly muttering to himself, his companion kindly, and with a smile, explained to the hostess that they just wanted to drink water from the fountain. The woman thought for a moment, then somewhat reluctantly, but politely invited them into the house and advised them to feel at home. The blueberry calmed down a bit but still remained cautious. She turned to the universe, asking it to respect the local spirits. In response, Typhon quickly defended it, confidently assuring that he would not allow such disrespectful behavior. The princess wanted so much to prove she was right that she addressed her question directly to the universe. In response, the universe gladly agreed to share its opinion, but their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a woman who appeared nearby and showed them the way to the fountain, with everything around decorated very brightly, as before a great celebration. At first, the girl approached the quiet water, which was barely rippling. She was told that this water could be drunk, but warned to be careful because unexpected health consequences might arise. Hearing this news, Typhon became upset and admitted that she had imagined everything quite differently. To this, the woman replied sarcastically that one can always blame the universe. She shared that this guy had already come here once with the heroes. Then a strange event happened. He caught a spirit and used it as a target for training. If it's hard to believe, you can always ask the hero himself. He will confirm it. The woman in the black headscarf continued telling the story. She explained that since then the spirits no longer came, so now there are almost no people here. The locals tried various ways to bring back the spirits and gain their forgiveness, even building a cathedral for this purpose. These spirits were very timid, but the nun did not lose hope. She decided to try patiently waiting. Perhaps at least one of the spirits would still return. To welcome the guests if they appeared, she decorated everything around her with the best she had. But now the girl became upset, barely holding back tears. She said that everything was already over, because after Mr. Universe appeared by the fountain, no one would return. But the boy's friend is sure that this is just a misunderstanding. The woman, unable to hold back tears, turned around and loudly asked what exactly Typhon meant when he spoke about misunderstanding. And then she noticed something that deeply surprised her. Typhon turned around and saw that the young man was surrounded by so many phantoms that the boy could barely be seen, as if he had completely dissolved among them. The woman was so surprised by everything that had happened that she could not hold back and began loudly talking about the multitude of spirits that appeared at the spring. She also emphasized that this veil, created from spirits, was almost invisible. Behind it, the silhouette of a figure was barely discernible. She could not restrain herself and loudly asked how this could be. She felt unwell, her head spun, and suddenly she fainted. The boy and the girl rushed to her, anxiously asking if she was okay, but quickly realized the situation was serious. They took her to a room, carefully laid her on the bed, covered her with a blanket, and left her to rest. Her temperature rose, and in her sleep she began to rave, saying that her friends would not leave her, and that she was very lonely here because she was completely alone. When she woke up, Typhon gave her water and explained that it was ordinary water. She thanked him and took a few sips. The girl shared that she had seen in a dream how spring spirits were swirling around the young man. However, she was told that it really happened, not just dreamed. She admitted that even if it was only a dream, she was glad to learn that this boy was able to summon spirits. The nun realized that she had been harsh and decided to approach the boy to sincerely apologize for her words. To this, he shyly said that there was no reason to worry. The hostess offered the guests to stay at her place for the night, as it was already dark and late to go home. Deep night, silence reigns all around. Everyone is sound asleep. Only the universe wakes up, sits on the edge of the bed, and can no longer fall asleep. He carefully got up and walked slowly, trying not to disturb the sleep of others. As it turned out, he was going to the garden where there was a lake. Everything around sparkled with decorations. The boy carefully took off one decoration after another and whispered so quietly, as if fearing severe punishment. He said that all this looked extraordinarily beautiful and paused for a moment, putting aside the next item. However, these creatures considered them too bright, and as he guessed, it might bother them. It turned out that all this time someone was secretly watching him, quietly peeking from a hiding place. The universe noticed that someone was peeking and gently expressed a guess. Probably she had just come into the world. He tenderly said that she should not be afraid, there was nothing left around that shown. He carefully reached out his hand to the little creature, but the spirit girl got scared and sharply pulled back. Then he quietly said that he wanted to help her get out of this place. She tightly closed her eyes, gathered her thoughts, and dared to bite his finger. Her little body trembled strongly with fear. When she opened her eyes, she noticed the bite mark and saw that his hand was still resting on her. A slight smile appeared on her face. It surprised her. Then the universe asked her if she had become calmer and reassured her that he did not intend to harm her. It turned out that this little one had the ability to heal. She simply licked the boy's wound, and it began to heal. She looked at him with a shy glance, and he calmed her down, saying that he was not offended by the child at all. A cheerful girl with a sincere smile on her face joyfully confessed that she dreamed of becoming his girlfriend. The universe gently invited him to sit on its palm, and immediately spirits appeared around him, glowing brightly in the darkness. The boy was surprised but honestly explained that although he was glad to see them, there was no need to behave the same way as during the day. If something needed to be said or discussed, it was better to address each one separately. The main character immediately realized that he regretted his choice, as an endlessly long queue stood before him. Then he could not hold back a smile and laughed, and at that very moment the spirit embraced him again. Someone else was watching this funny scene with interest through the window. It was a nun. She could not peek because the spirits of spring had already gone back to their homes. She still could not recover from the surprise and quietly said that they all missed the universe very much, although it seemed they should have hated it. Typhon approached her and assured that he always treated the spirits well, so they respected him. Meanwhile, the girl turned to Typhon's friend. She wanted to find out if it was really so and directly asked if she was a spirit of the wind. In response, the girl apologized for not introducing herself earlier and gave her name. The black-haired woman looked a little confused and asked the name again, adding that in their people there was a princess with that name. Typhon smiled embarrassedly and admitted that she was that very princess. The nun was so surprised and frightened that she could not hold back and screamed at the top of her voice. Her scream was so loud that even those who were on the street heard it. Hearing the scream, Visesvit immediately ran to them and asked if they were okay. He did not expect this. His friend looked confused and nervously twisted her hair between her fingers. The lady fell to her knees and began to apologize, for she did not even suspect that before her stood a real princess. In the spirit world, everything is done for everyone, so they are valued and especially respected here. In this world, a strict hierarchy reigns. Many believe that humans stand at its top. Typhon tried to convey that there is nothing wrong with this. A little girl looked with delight at the spirits of spring who appeared before her. She asked if they loved the universe. Without waiting for an answer, the girl sincerely said that she herself loved this world and joyfully threw herself into its embrace. The girl kneeling looked up at both of them sincerely, surprise clearly visible on her face. Confused, she decided to find out for herself why the spirits were so fond of him, because the spirits of spring usually do not like to interact with people and keep their distance. The The universe turned away, and Typhon took the word instead. He said that from him flows such soft tenderness that envelops her completely, like the fragrant scent of flowers. That is why she unconsciously reaches out to him, like a butterfly, flying very close. The girl who was standing on the floor lowered her head again. She sincerely appealed to him, with a request to explain how to return the spirits back to their refuge. The universe wondered why she needed it. She raised her eyes and looked at him with sadness. The woman began to say that more and more forest was being cut down near them because they wanted to build a cathedral there. She said that eventually there would be no forest left at all. It would be replaced by a park for walks. Then she explained even louder that if that happens, the spirits will be left homeless. She asked for help because it would be difficult for her to cope with it alone. The main character will start stuttering and say that he already understands what the problem is. Everyone around will smile, especially the mistress of the cathedral. The next day, the universe explained that the creatures from the fountain dislike light that does not reflect in the water. Because of this, all decorations had to be removed. The nun sadly admitted that she did not know about it and thought that everyone would like the sparks. Tiffin, having finished cleaning, asked if anything else needed help and offered to clean the water in the fountain. However, she was told that the spirits would handle it themselves. They explained that mineral water springs cleanse themselves over time, but this can take up to 10 years. At that moment, she wanted to say something but did not manage to finish and stopped. All this happened because the universe told the spirits, if any of them want to have fun with him and help purify the water, they just need to land on his finger. And immediately on that finger, a mushroom cap will appear, in which these spirits will hide. He cheerfully said that now we can rest, and waved his hand, indicating where we should fly next. The spirits joyfully swirled around and combined their powers, purifying the water in the fountain. Those who watched this miracle felt genuine childlike joy as it looked magical and fairy tale-like. The girl suddenly screamed and looked into the water. Looking at herself, she saw that she was completely cleansed. With slight disappointment, she admitted that her behavior had been foolish, senseless, and not serious at all. She quietly and sadly began to tell him that she grew up in this shelter and always thought she understood spirits better than anyone else. Typhon came closer to comfort her and gently stroked her head. She decided to support her interlocutor and added that, no matter how difficult it was, she was persistently trying to understand the spirits. The woman agreed with this and continued listening. The girl said that she noticed how the master communicates with spirits just like with people. Although many perceive them only as beasts, Typhon smiled and noted that the spirits are sincerely glad when they are treated as equals. The nun understood the essence of what was said and asked if she could ever become like her mentor if she followed the advice. The girl asked who exactly she considered her teacher, and then it turned out that the nun meant the universe itself. The boy stood aside and quietly watched their conversation, already anticipating that something was about to happen. The princess noticed that the spirits of the wind liked this boy much more than herself. The woman with dark hair noticed that their teacher was a special person. The girl agreed with her, emphasizing that he really was amazing. In their eyes, happiness flashed, and it seemed that the whole world around shone with new colors. They smiled and admitted, he is their teacher. The boy carefully carved something with a knife. Typhon noticed the boy and decided to come closer to see what he was occupied with. The spirit circled around, carefully watching his every move. When she noticed how the boy was carving a figure out of wood, her face lit up with joy, and she asked with interest if he really knew how to craft such things. She asked if he was creating a place for the spirits that live here. The universe confirmed that this was exactly what he was doing. Then she remembered that he had been here before. Suddenly, the nun interrupted the story and claimed that the hero supposedly did everything himself for the spirit, but the girl immediately objected and explained that everything was completely different. The girl decided to ask the boy once more if it was really so, and he noticeably became worried. The woman, dressed modestly as is characteristic of the apostles, expressed her opinion. In reality, this man was evil and treated the spirits cruelly. At that time, it was hard for her to believe it, so she denied everything. She sat down and bent toward the ground, sincerely asking forgiveness for her ignorance. The universe, a bit confused by such behavior, nervously asked her to raise her head. However, without raising her eyes, she said that she was not worthy of this, as she had made a great mistake concerning him. While the woman was speaking, she was suddenly overcome by fear. She realized that not only had she been mistaken herself, but another nun from the neighboring cathedral had also acted improperly. Because of this, she became confused and no longer knew what to do next, and her interlocutors, understanding nothing, decided to find out what had happened. They went up to the upper floor of the cathedral and entered one of the rooms. Then, from a large object, they carefully removed the cover and before everyone appeared a statue of an unknown person. Taifun covered her mouth with her hand, surprised when she realized that the statue depicted exactly the hero who once saved the entire country. The boy, impressed by her words, asked if she really thought so. The girl decided to find out why this statue was installed here. The woman admitted that they were competing with the neighboring cathedral, so they decided to create a statue of the hero and see who could attract more spring spirits. After that, the participants had to show their creations to King Vaswamp, and he was the one who decided who would become the winner. Having listened to this story, the girl addressed her with a question, because it was not entirely clear to her how everything had turned out this way. To this, he heard a distressed answer. Without the spring spirits, they would not be able to take care of this place, and without such support, the temple could collapse. That is why they decided to share the hero among themselves, lending him to each other. But now she understood. The statue of the hero cannot summon spirits, and she has no idea what to do next. At that moment, Taifun cheerfully said that in reality everything is extremely simple. She confidently stated that she was capable of creating a statue that would depict the entire universe. The boy became very embarrassed and blushed, as he never thought that the solution would be his own statue. However, the woman announced that the king would appear only in a few days and promised Taifun to show the hero's statue. Taifun was convinced. If spirits needed to be summoned, there was no choice to make. Only after these words did the nun agree to help. The princess emphasized that if everyone worked together, they would definitely manage and complete the task. She addressed the spirits to find out if they supported this idea. In response, she heard a cheerful squeak. It was a clear sign of agreement. Both girls were very impressed and delighted, so they decided to create a statue in honor of Mr. Universe. However, the universe itself refused to create it, explaining that no one erects monuments to themselves. It was noticeable that he was very worried. At this news, everyone simply froze in place, not believing their ears. Their mouths even opened in surprise. Immediately, people gathered around him, began asking questions and praising him, saying he was a true expert in this matter. The boy shyly admitted that it was indeed so, but added that he would feel very uncomfortable creating a monument in his own honor. Hearing this, the girl decided to find out for herself what had happened in the village of Eden. However, the boy replied that this story concerned only her. Upset and barely holding back tears, Taifun asked him if it was really bad to have such feelings. After all, he was a good person, and many admired him. So now everything will become even more interesting for each of us. He accepted this and began sculpting his own statue. The girls sincerely thanked for the support, and in response, they told her that they just helped a little to cope with the hard work. She confessed that she was very happy to have the opportunity to work together with them. He recalled how Taifun said that they were together and thought with relief, if she is happy, then everything is fine. When the universe finished creating this body, everyone looked at it with admiration and considered it the true embodiment of perfection. They confidently said that they would handle the task of obtaining the head themselves. They tried many times to redo everything, hoping to improve, but the result was completely unsuccessful. Fatigue was taking its toll, and with each minute they became more and more irritated because nothing was working out for them. The boy came to them, but Taifun immediately warned him not to come closer and asked him to leave. When the boy was already about to go, he threw a phrase that if this face was sharpened a little more, it would become very small. She silently screamed in her thoughts that her inner beast of creativity was still not awakening. She explained that this sculpture was not about any special idea, but only about how the master was able to see and release the true essence of the stone outside. After these words, the woman sighed deeply, and silence reigned around, as if the universe itself was listening attentively to her. After some time, he called her and suggested seeking help from the little spirits of the earth. She sincerely rejoiced, and her mood instantly improved. The girl was surprised at how well they understood everything and suggested they create their own universe together. She seriously put on her glasses, threw her coat back, and stood confidently to appear even cooler. Maintaining her confident look, she took the lead. She pointed out that the nose should be made more crooked, and more cracks should be added to the teeth to make the sculpture look more realistic. When she was almost finished, she said it already looked very similar and wonderful. At that moment, a nun entered the room and suggested taking a short break for a snack. Everyone gladly agreed to rest and refresh themselves. The spirits of spring and earth were also drinking tea and enjoying sweets, savoring the treat. They remained satisfied and full. Even Taifun looked happy. The chief abbess of the cathedral approached the boy and asked if he could stay for a moment for an important conversation. The boy hesitated for a moment, then mumbled something indistinctly in response. She dreamed of learning to understand spirits as skillfully as her mentor does. She also shared that she always believed people could only drive spirits away, and when she needed their help, she caught them with a net, as if catching insects. However, the young master never acts that way, yet everyone gladly helps him. Because of this, she wondered, how can one become like him? He listened carefully to the conversation and sank into his thoughts. However, later he said that these things would still have to be used. He said that spirits feel joy when asked for help and can sometimes be very useful, but this does not mean they reveal themselves to everyone. Spirits never help those who treat them merely as tools for personal gain. He continued to explain that these people are not just subordinates who follow orders. It is more accurate to consider them allies with whom you create the future together. All he desires is to see happy smiles on the faces of the spirits beside him, for he always cares for them. When he finished speaking, he noticed that everyone was listening attentively and was moved by what he said. Even Typhon, barely holding back tears, approached him and asked why he was so kind, for that is what makes him a true friend and a reliable ally. The universe was confused and turned to them with a request to stop communicating like that. To be more precise, please, that's enough already. Even at this moment, he said it very politely, and the girls immediately laughed. In response, he pouted, turning away offended. In the neighboring city, people look with admiration at the large statue of the hero, named Breben. On the horizon, the majestic cathedral of the founder is visible, a place where people find peace and refuge for the heart. But right now, the silence is pierced by a cry in which deep disappointment is heard. The great nun anxiously wonders why the spirits of spring have not yet appeared, although such a magnificent statue of the hero has already been solemnly erected for them. She is very nervous and keeps whispering to herself that if she does not win, she will never be able to become a true nun. Behind the door, some movement was heard, and someone seriously called the woman. Having calmed down, she confidently invited him to enter. The girls came in and reported that they had brought donations this week and asked to have them accepted. She thanked them for their help, hurriedly let them go, and assured them in parting that the spirits would surely bless them. After that, she quickly poured coins out of the pouch and took one coin between two fingers. At that moment, it finally dawned on her. She felt that the statue lacked brightness. She believed, if it looked more shiny and radiant, then the spirits would gather around it just like moths fly to the light at night. Next, she will say to destroy the shelter for the spirits nearby, to remove once, and for all this Holy Mother who always bothers her. She imagines that soon she will become the mistress of this land and receive a lot of money and power. Even now she dreams that all her wishes will come true, and it will happen very soon. The nun glanced at the chest, decorated with precious stones. She sadly told that the patrons no longer send her money, and the funds left barely suffice to pay the monks. What prompted her to stake everything, both her own life and the fate of these saints who finally found their peace here. On the table lay a letter that said, if the debt is not repaid on time, the head nun along with 5 saints of this cathedral will be given into slavery. The man in the hat congratulated the woman on successfully buying the chest at a good price and said that it was a pleasure working with her. The woman received a huge chest. When she saw so many coins, she could not hide her delight. She was confident that from now on people would talk about her throughout the entire entertainment district, and all the residents would admire the shining statue of the hero. The nun joyfully scattered coins around the room, thinking that tomorrow at the opening ceremony of the hero statues, King Vasavamp himself would visit. Realizing this only increased her confidence in her future victory. She was convinced that great success awaited her. Finally, the day came when it would be decided who would win. Someone said that today was the day to choose which of the cathedrals would become the true temple. Now everyone was preparing to compare the statues. That is why I give my promise to King Vasavamp. The ruler thoughtfully examined. The first statue, which was the largest and stood near the source cathedral, impressed only with a beautiful face, while the rest of it did not stand out. Above all, it is important how strongly it can call the spirits of spring. The great nun said that this had already been taken care of. When the cloth is removed from the figure, everyone will be able to see the true face of the hero. At that moment, the spirits will surely appear here and push down the statue standing nearby. Suddenly, a young nun approached the conversation. She apologized for interrupting and added that they had all worked hard together on creating their statue. Hearing these words, her rival only laughed, not believing that she could have made this statue with someone else, since she had always seen her alone. Because of this, the girl became sad. The king decided to calm the quarrel between the women and announced that, when he gave the signal, everyone should simultaneously remove the veils from the statues. The girls were already ready. The signal was given, and in an instant, the veils were simultaneously removed from each sculpture. The outlines of the statues were already becoming visible. The king looked at them and did not hide his surprise. At the ball, one of the large statues was doused with perfume from head to toe. Even the nun who created this work herself could not contain her astonishment and cried out loudly. Vosvamp, not understanding why himself, felt this sculpture was created in honor of the universe. The woman was surprised and politely asked if he was acquainted with the teacher. He was a little nervous and even stammered, answering that he did not personally know this boy. However, everyone the ruler had asked so far spoke only well of the young man. The girl smiled sincerely and gladly agreed that His Majesty was right. She added that her teacher was indeed a very good person. And no spirit among all enjoys such respect as the teacher. Even to his statue, countless beings constantly come, although it is just his image. The king listened carefully to the lady, nodded, and said he understood everything. Then he noticed that all the spirits around were smiling just like Princess Typhon. At that moment, the evil nun decided to slander the good one, claiming that all this was just fiction. She assured everyone that the spirits supposedly could not touch the statue of the false hero. He continued to accuse her of lying, but she insisted on her point. The girl explained that she herself had summoned the spirits and forced them to appear, because otherwise it would not be clear why there were so many of them. She added that this act was wrong, and now the spirits would hate her and would no longer come. Suddenly a wind rose, and everyone felt anxiety, as if something bad was about to happen. The great nun suddenly fell silent and began to listen intently to the surrounding silence. But suddenly an interesting idea occurred to her, and an ironic smile appeared on her face. When the girl went out to perform, she asked everyone to look at the forest. She said the forest was crying. Her explanation was simple. Spring was offended and angry. At that very moment, spirits poured out from there. There were so many of them that everyone gathered for the ceremonial unveiling of the statues immediately noticed it. The nun suddenly exclaimed with joy. She saw that all the spirits were flying straight to her hero's statue, and now all this would become her prey. When the performance came to an end, she loudly addressed the spirits, ordering them to be on alert. She ordered the destruction of the statue of the fictional hero named Universe. Pointing her hand at the enemy's building, she sent a whole cloud of spirits there. However, her order was ignored. Instead, everyone forcefully knocked down the statue of Brabin, and it thundered heavily to the ground. The woman, overwhelmed with rage, screamed loudly, holding her head tightly. She repeated that they had taken down the wrong statue. She did not fall silent for a moment, constantly shouting at them and demanding that they stop immediately. She screamed in despair and begged for help, but the statue simply fell apart into fragments. She realized how her entire future seemed to be crumbling right before her eyes. Stones poured down, falling to the ground and onto one of the buildings. Upon impact, the stones shattered into small pieces. The building began to collapse, and amid the terrible rumble, frightened people from the surrounding houses hurriedly ran out onto the street. The woman stood stunned, not taking her eyes off the destruction unfolding before her. Finally, it was all over. All the buildings had collapsed, and only a cloud of dust remained around. At that moment, several nuns approached the Holy Mother and knelt before her. They prayed sincerely, begging forgiveness for their serious mistake, and asked for permission to return under her protection to the shelter for souls. She only smiled in response and assured that their home is always open to anyone who visits. They can return at any time. She also advised from that moment on to live in harmony with the spirits of spring and to follow the teachings of the mentor of the universe. Everyone agreed together, but one of the other holy mothers suddenly stopped them. She angrily swayed from side to side and shouted loudly that she would not let them leave with her nuns. She began to threaten even more fiercely that she would sell her into slavery and abandon her to fate. Suddenly, a figure appeared nearby and said that we need to go to this very place. 3 people appeared. In their hands were ropes and shackles. The first was a man with dark hair. He immediately began asking where the saint who owed him a large sum of money was located. The woman who had just shouted loudly began to hint to the others whom they were really looking for and forced these girls to also wash the Holy Mother. The man shared that he has many beautiful women living at his home. He hopes that they will all find common ground, and that way he can earn well. He assured the women not to worry and promised that they would like it here. Just then someone from the crowd remarked that there was no need to hurry. The leader stopped and looked toward the one who said it, not hiding that he would have preferred silence. Before them stood King Vasvamp himself. He sternly declared that he would not allow these people to be taken away. The men froze in confusion upon seeing the king and were even more surprised when he defended the girls. They anxiously asked why he was here. Since the boy gave no answer, he suddenly addressed them himself with a stern look. Why were they here, and why did they need these people? The black man flatteringly addressed the king, politely calling him, "Your Royal Majesty." He handed over a sheet of paper on which it was written that all the holy cathedrals were left as collateral. The ruler carefully read the agreement and confirmed that everything was written correctly, exactly as it should be. But these saints belong to the home altar, not to the cathedral, so they cannot serve as a guarantee of this testament. The man became nervous and began to think, if this is not the saint he needs, then where is the one he is looking for? He looked carefully at the other Holy Mother. He spoke louder and declared that it was exactly her, while having no idea he would meet an elderly person there. Disappointedly sighing, he stepped back and accepted his fate, while the other two were already ready to take her with them. The woman did not expect such a turn of events and tried to object. She found herself locked in a cage on wheels, and the man nearby treated her with contempt and constantly called her an old woman. He declared that now she had to work off the money she once borrowed, and they didn't care what price she paid. The main thing was that she received her punishment. Everyone silently watched as the carriage drove away, taking the woman away. Finally, the king addressed the holy maiden and said that although he had not officially announced anything yet, it was clear to everyone that she was the winner of the competition. Hearing these words, the maiden sincerely thanked the king, filled with joy. Then they, together with Vasvamp, set off for the shelter of spirits. He exclaimed with admiration that this place is extraordinarily beautiful and impresses with its simplicity, saying he would gladly stay here for a few days. At that moment, Typhon and Universe were intently watching the half-open door. The boy began to share with the girl that he had to deliver something important. He fell silent for a moment. Then, leaning close to her ear so no one else could hear, he quietly said that they were being watched for a reason, and they needed to figure out how to get out of here. The woman was amused by his words and laughed out loud. The Universe tried to calm her down and asked her to be quieter. Then she decided to call the Holy Mother, who was waiting behind the door. The girl told the nun that they were leaving. She confessed that they had been on a honeymoon and planned to continue it. The young man was surprised to hear this. The woman laughed and said she understood everything, adding that she had long suspected they were not just friends. The princess smiled and agreed with her, confirming her guess. The black-haired girl sincerely confessed that she dreams of being connected with the spirits of spring. She strives to become just as harmonious and kind, and most of all, to receive sincere trust from the whole heart. She was a little confused, but smiled and confidently said that this time everything would definitely work out. The girl asked the universe what it thought about it, but in response she did not hear a single word, only saw it smile. He noted that the spirits had already felt a connection with the Holy Mother, and the princess noticed it too. Everything became clear to her. The creatures gently embraced the girl who stood confused and could not understand why her teacher was silent in response to her question. The nuns saw the guests off to the carriage, sadly waving goodbye as they set off on their further journey. Two young ladies approached the girl and smiled warmly. The spirits fluttered their wings cheerfully and quickly flew upward. The universe looked in their direction and smiled faintly. He was happy for this girl because now she had not just acquaintances, but true friends. She felt happy. Some time passed as they traveled, and finally they stopped. The boy announced that they had almost reached the kingdom's capital. Next, he said, they would have to wear the konkan. He noticed that according to the plan, they would need to pass through the capital, but most likely their wanted posters were already posted there. The city had many people, so they needed to be as careful as possible. Then the girl suggested changing clothes and disguising themselves. Suddenly, as if by the wave of a magic wand, the princess appeared before him. She was disguised, wearing a hat, glasses, and a mask. From the very first word, she warned that her ears were blocked. The boy just looked at her and remarked that such an appearance seemed rather strange. She quickly realized it was time to change the approach, so this time she appeared as a dancer, dressed in bright, colorful clothes. Turning to her companion, she asked if she now looked like a real dancer. She said that from their city, located very close by, music could be heard. At this time, the entire universe remembers the bright festival held in honor of the heroes. He finally made up his mind and informed Typhon that they would take this path. The girl sincerely rejoiced and said it was time to set off on the journey. Then the boy asked not to hurry. The girl was surprised because she did not understand the reason for such a request, so she decided to find out why he did not want to rush. He told her that if she started dancing, they would attract too much attention and it could give them away. After that, he asked why she decided to change her clothes. The girl got offended and quietly muttered that he could also use a change of clothes. All this is only because it would look strange, a girl dancing next to a boy in an ordinary work shirt. She reinforced her words by the fact that their photos hang on the walls, so everyone already understands that they are together. The princess looked as if she was less interested in being caught and more just wanted to see the boy she liked in a new outfit. She smiled a little sarcastically and looked at him. She smiled and told him to change clothes, while she began looking for new clothes for him. Universe silently agreed and went to fulfill her request. Typhon was in high spirits, pleased with herself. She jokingly asked where all such wonderful boys disappear to, meaning herself. She dressed Mr. Universe like a true fashionable musician trumpeter. The boy felt embarrassed in this outfit and noticed that he looked too bright. The girl assured him that this style is very popular nowadays. She shared her idea. The boy would play the trumpet, and she would dance nearby, although it might seem unusual. She was hurrying and urging him on to avoid suspicion, but in response, he only loudly called her name. He strictly forbade her even to think about dancing. They reached the kingdom of Vasvampu and immediately arrived at its capital. At that very time, the fiercest stage of the dance competition was taking place here, held at the festival honoring heroes. She was genuinely happy when they arrived in the city. She even couldn't hold back and exclaimed with joy, admitting that she really liked it here. Typhon, in a good mood, suggested to his friend to dance together for fun. The universe realized that she does not care about him at all. Meanwhile, people noticed a girl who was dancing right on the roof of the carriage. The crowd immediately buzzed that she was a real star, dancing great and looking very cool. While the boy was driving the carriage, everyone around shouted to the girl that she was the best. But suddenly his gaze stopped on a wanted poster, and it scared him a lot. The stranger first watched the man who was sobbing, then looked at the cart that was just passing by, and then, fixing his gaze on Universe, made him nervous. He got scared because if they get caught, the consequences could be truly terrible. Everything ended well. The man also supported the girl, called her beautiful, and advised her not to stop, but to move forward and continue in the same direction. The boy sighed with relief because he had already thought he was about to be caught. Suddenly, the princess approached him and began to ask to dance together, but he only shyly said that he could not dance at all. Adding to his answer, he advises her to look around, pointing out that their portraits with wanted posters hang on almost every corner. The girl sincerely wonders and asks if it is really him, because on the sign he looks completely different, as if it is another person. Universe confusedly asks if she is joking. Then the girl explains that in that portrait, he looks more like Brabant. Typhon firmly states that it cannot be left like that, and resolutely prepares to get out of the car to tear down all the posters. However, the young man stops her. He explains to her that if she tears down the wanted flyers, it will be illegal, as such actions are a serious violation. Reluctantly agrees to let her dance, but most importantly, forbids touching the posters. The girl agrees with the boy, but adds that it is not worth traveling often through dangerous areas. In such situations, it is better to remain unnoticed so as not to attract unnecessary attention. She climbs onto the roof again and prepares to dance. He watches as the princess climbs the stairs and smiles. Quietly he says, if she said so, then that is exactly how it will be. A real celebration unfolded in the square. People had already gathered, and someone began the solemn opening of the main event dedicated to the heroes. The host announced that the strongest participants of the dance contest were already ready and invited everyone willing to join the performances on stage. He continued explaining the competition rules, noting that the team that wins will receive a special prize. Meanwhile, the universe mentally noted that the capital's residents truly adore dancing. The first participant came onto the stage, ready to show everyone their skills. The host announced that the girl on stage was extremely cute and added that everyone in the hall agreed with this. He encouraged her with a joke, saying she had already won in the category of most charming appearance. At that moment, the universe suddenly realized that this girl was Typhon and felt that this was crossing all boundaries. She stepped onto the stage and immediately said that she was known not only for her sweetness and beauty, but also for her dancing skills. The girl confidently promised that she would become the winner of the dance contest. The announcer was surprised by her words and said that if she considered herself the winner, she had great courage. After that, the audience began to rejoice and celebrate. He said that he wanted to see how she danced, and for that, he needed to invite his musicians. She was surprised, did not understand his plan, and asked which musicians he meant. He immediately replied, as if he had rehearsed in advance, that dancing without music was impossible, since every dancer needs their own melody. Musicians invent amazing melodies using modern electronic instruments. Many young people are fascinated by this and dream of becoming such masters. Upset, Typhon left the stage. Her friend called her by name, and she sadly replied to him, also calling him by name. She decided to ask him for advice about her next steps. She was explained that to participate in the dance competition, she definitely needed a musical assistant, so she began to think about how to solve this issue. The girl shared with Kun that she had long dreamed of dancing with people in the real world. She believed that this would become possible after marrying the hero, but he did not allow her to fulfill this dream. Tears appeared in her eyes when she confessed that she very much dreamed of performing in front of everyone for the first time today. She asked him, could he come up with something to help her? The young man only now realized the spirits of the wind adore dancing, but Typhon, although she very much desired it, could not allow herself to dance. After all, she was a princess. Yet when he brought her to the capital, famous for dancing, he himself forbade her to dance. At the same time, he addressed her by name. He firmly told the girl that even if he did not yet know how to play electronic instruments, he would still do everything required of him. He promised that he would definitely help her get on stage. His words sincerely touched and pleased her. Without hesitation, she rushed to announce that she would definitely participate. She returned and reported that she was told to appear later. The young man nodded in understanding. He pondered, and Typhon looked upset. He sincerely apologized for making her worry, but the girl only smiled and said it was a trifle and not worth worrying about. Then the universe decided to cheer her up. He promised that he would not retreat and would always fight for the spirits. The girl paused for a moment, then smiled and replied that his words did not at all resemble the promises of that hero. It seemed she wanted to show that she truly trusted her friend. Because a true hero always strives to become famous and never gives up. That is why he wanted Typhon to leave everything and make any sacrifice for him. It is also important that spirits choose their master, not because you are the best at everything, like that hero or Mr. Universe Kun, but precisely because you are different from them. The girl remembered how her current boyfriend once asked her to dance for him. She intended to just sit down, while the boyfriend wanted to warn her that it was not the best idea, but he didn't manage to. She sat down and suddenly, with unexpected pain, jumped up and screamed. The boy and the girl dared to peek at what was hiding there. They saw an old gramophone. Universe examined this device and noted that it is well assembled and very reliable inside. Therefore, it can be used safely without any worries. He read the inscription that said this item was made especially for dueling. Suddenly, something responded to these words. A voice came from the device. It turned out that spirits of trees stood before them. They addressed the young couple and asked if they knew Dudla. The boy explained that all this was familiar to him because he was a carpenter and often worked with the sounds of wood. The spirits were surprised by such an answer, as people once danced to similar music, but now the youth were more fascinated by loud metal devices. Then the boy suggested they play their music once more, this time especially for him. They immediately agreed gladly and said they would be happy to play for him. But they asked him if he was perhaps a novice, since the juniors did not even allow him to prove himself. But the boy convinced them that they were wrong. In fact, he just really wanted that girl to perform on stage again. Typhoons noticed that these spirits looked extremely cute and began to examine them with interest. She also said that she really dreams of dancing to their music. She invited them to dance together with a smile and promised that it would be fun. They hesitated for a moment. Eventually, they agreed, recalling how sincerely the girl invited them to join her. The universe wiped the dust off the gramophone, and at that very moment, a boy entered the room. He called Typhon to the stage and warned her to start preparing. The host announced that the dance contest was coming to an end. The last team of wind dancers came on stage. The audience greeted them with loud applause and joyful cheers. At that time, the boy and the girl carried an old gramophone onto the stage, counting steps in sync. The attendees looked at the strange wooden device with surprise, not understanding what it was. Someone from the guests finally hinted. It was a gramophone, and added that once his father had one like that. Surprised exclamations were heard from all sides. Everyone immediately noticed that this device was very old. Some joked that such a girl would be better off playing a modern synthesizer. Suddenly, someone jumped up, quickly took the microphone from the host, and began to speak. She decided to put an end to this conversation by saying that such words were inappropriate. She suggested simply listening to the performance, as it promised to be really cool. Moreover, the legendary DJ Universe would be playing on stage. The audience became even more agitated. They murmured indignantly and insisted that they had never heard anything like that. Meanwhile, the boy near the gramophone noticeably became nervous. But the spirits did not allow him to be upset. They hurried to calm him down, promising that there was no need to worry. They themselves came to have a good time, so everything would be resolved. He smiled, and Typhon also turned to him with a joyful smile. She sincerely thanked the boy. This moment was a real gift for her, one she had waited for so long. But the universe reminded them that it was too early to rejoice. This was only the beginning. They had just taken their marks, and now they learned their number.